Chapter 3078, Entanglement. 1. When the middle-aged man heard this, his originally smiling face darkened, and the muscles on half of his face twitched violently. Then, he patiently coaxed, "Little doll, uncle isn't a strange shuli." When Ruize heard this, he very seriously observed the other party for a while, and then nodded his head cautiously. "You're already an old cucumber, yet you're still pretending to be young." When the middle-aged man heard this, his face completely darkened. He couldn't help but feel disgusted in his heart. This little brat was really not cute. Why was his mouth so vicious? I really don't know which family's brat he is. Why aren't his parents taking care of him? He admitted that he was not young anymore, but he was not pretending to be young. She was young to begin with. The middle-aged man thought to himself. Second brother, that's called painting an old cucumber green. You didn't study hard and didn't even know this idiom. At this time, Rui Jean, who was gnawing on a fruit, suddenly said. The middle-aged man was even more depressed. Why didn't he know that painting old cucumbers green was also an idiom? However, he also discovered that these two brats' mouths were as poisonous as the other s. As for the only one who was pretending to be silent and looking at him with a smile, although he had not said anything, the middle-aged man did not dare to hope that he would hear something nice from the other party. As expected, it was Saint Rui's turn to speak. He smiled and said, "You two rascals, who allowed you to talk to strangers? Don't you know that the other party might kidnap us? We're so cute, so we're the perfect targets for those bad guys. Big brother's teaching is right." When Rui Zi and Rui Qiao heard this, they quickly said in unison. The middle-aged man was secretly sulking. How were these two devilish children? There were clearly 3 of them. It was 3. None of the 3 disobedient children were kind-hearted. They were all black-hearted little demons. The middle-aged man was furious. He had only been hitting on her. He was really hitting on her. Why did these 3 disobedient children think he was a bad guy? Who was that? Where are your parents? Let's have a good talk. The indignant middle-aged man's face turned black, then green. Then green, then white, like a palette of dark and gloomy colors. The onlookers couldn't help but sigh. They didn't try to strike up a conversation with the 3 children, or they would probably be treated the same way. From this, it could be seen that the 3 children's vigilance was not ordinary. Of course, they mainly didn't think that the child's parents would not be around. If there was a misunderstanding and the parents thought that they were abductors, they would be looking for trouble. In just a few minutes, the onlookers had made up their minds not to care about these 3 milk babies. After the 3 children said that, they turned their heads away and no longer looked at the middle-aged man who was sulking. The gorgeous girl saw that the old ancestor had suffered a loss at the hands of the 3 little children, so she wanted to perform well and regain some face for the old ancestor. Therefore, the next moment, she ran to the 3rd little child and said with a smile, "Little brother, my ancestor is not a bad person. You can't treat him like this." "Then how should we treat him?" Saint Rui blinked his eyes and asked curiously. "You have to respect him, he's your elder." The gorgeous young lady saw that there was a chance and quickly said. "Whose elder is he?" Saint Rui asked in confusion. "Who knows? Anyway, it's not mine." Rui Zi said calmly, a hint of ridicule flashing in his dark eyes. Nowadays, there were always people who liked to pretend to be elders to gain respect. He was really annoying. Ah. The gorgeous girl was stunned for a moment before she responded, "No matter which family you belong to, shouldn't you respect those who are older than you? According to what you said, there are too many people that we have to respect. Wouldn't we die of exhaustion?" Rui Zi said a little impatiently. Although he was only 1 year old, his IQ was by no means the same as a 1-year-old child. He had always hated people who wanted to point fingers just because they were older. Damn it. Did he really think he was a dish? He was just a passerby. You can't understand it that way. Didn't your parents teach you to respect the elderly? The gorgeous girl obviously didn't hear Rui's impatience and wanted to turn the little child in front of her around. In her opinion, this little child was not respectful to the elderly because he had been raised wrongly. While he was still young, she couldn't let them be so rude. We've always respected the elderly. More importantly, our parents have always warned us not to talk to strangers, especially strangers with other purposes. Ruizi said calmly. Ah. We don't have any purpose, and we're not Grandmother Wolf. We just simply thought you were cute and wanted to get to know you. The gorgeous young woman hurriedly said. But we don't want to know you. Ruizi was very honest. The gorgeous girl almost went crazy after hearing this. This little boy was really not cute. Yes, we're so cute. You obviously have ulterior motives for wanting to get to know us. The possibility of you trying to kidnap us is 80%. As for the other 20%, I'm sure you don't have good intentions either. In this day and age, no one will be good to you for no reason, unless it's their own parents. Seeing that the gorgeous young lady had nothing to say, Rui Jin, who was gnawing on a fruit, interrupted. Little Yingying has grown up. Saint Rui touched Rui Qiao's head and sighed, as if he was saying, my son is growing up, and this thought of his made many people laugh. Who wouldn't be amused when they saw a little kid praising another little kid in the tone of an elder? In particular, the little child who was praised raised his head arrogantly as if he was responding to his brother's words, which made him even more amused. However, at this moment, both the middle-aged man and the gorgeous young lady were extremely depressed. The two of them could be considered to have seen a lot, but today, because of the 3 milk children, their minds were tormented. Such an experience was really rare. Unfortunately, no matter what they thought in their hearts, it had nothing to do with the 3. After they had enough of the sun, the 3 directly went back to the cabin to rest. Dinner was personally delivered to the 3 of them by the captain. The captain received He Mingqian's generous tip, so he naturally had to take good care of these 3 little children who were traveling alone. The captain was also aware of what had happened on the deck. However, seeing that the old and the young did not seem to be hostile to the 3rd child, he did not interfere. The next day, the 3 children met a middle-aged man and a gorgeous girl on the deck. The middle-aged man thought that they were familiar with each other after yesterday's encounter, so he naturally waved at the 3 little fellows to greet them. However, the 3 of them walked past the middle-aged man and the gorgeous girl, completely ignoring them. The middle-aged man was extremely depressed. He was certain that the 3 devilish children were doing this on purpose. However, he felt that the 3rd baby had a character and was a promising talent. Therefore, he was more concerned about the 3rd baby. The gorgeous girl saw that the old ancestor was very interested in the 3rd child. In order to please the old ancestor, she came up with an idea, since the old forefather likes them so much, why don't we just take them away? Chapter 3079, Entanglement, 2, Then aren't we really bad guys? The middle-aged man glared at the gorgeous girl and said unhappily. How can old forefather think like this? Aren't we doing this for their own good? More importantly, it's the 3rd child's good fortune to be able to join our sect. In the future, they'll be above the rest. By then, their parents will be grateful to us. After all, we've provided them with an opportunity to come into contact with our circle. The gorgeous young lady said with extreme pride. It had to be said that the gorgeous young lad's words moved the middle-aged man, but when he turned back to look at the 3 milk babies, he quickly retracted his thoughts. Looking at the temperament of these 3, they didn't seem like children from ordinary families. If the other party's background was too big, it would cause trouble for their sect, and it would not be worth it. I think it's better to get their parents' approval. The middle-aged man said cautiously. Old ancestor, how could their parents possibly disagree? So what if the 3rd child was from a top-rich family? They should be grateful to us. Besides, if they perform well, we can totally take these 3 children's families as subsidiary families. You know, this is a supreme glory for them. The gorgeous young lady said confidently. Although the middle-aged man felt that the young girl's words made sense, he still felt that it was inappropriate. After all, he really liked these 3 children. Thus, after thinking about it seriously, he still rejected the young girl's suggestion. When the young girl saw that the old ancestor did not take her opinion, she was naturally angry. She also did not have a good impression of the 3 little children. However, the young girl had other ideas in her mind, and she was secretly calculating the feasibility of this matter. However, the 3 little children did not know what the girl was thinking. They were so happy on the boat that they almost forgot about home. After nearly a week of sailing, they finally arrived at the eastern shore of planet Indigo. Before disembarking, Rui Xian first went online to search for delicacies from all over the world, and then persistently moved towards her goal. The internet said that the seafood in an island city on the east coast was very fresh and delicious. After getting off the boat, Rui Jin pulled her 2 brothers and took another plane to the city. By right, Rui Jin had eaten a lot of seafood, but he was still very interested in seafood. Especially the large lobsters, he would never get tired of them. When they arrived at the city, they found the most famous seafood restaurant there and went straight in. Although there were no waiters to stop them from entering, when they were ordering, the waiter asked, "Little friend, where are your parents?" The waiter had never seen such a young child go down to the restaurant alone. Moreover, he was afraid that the 3 children would not have the money to pay the bill. "My parents are at home. Auntie, can we order now?" Saint Rui said honestly, his eyes flashing with impatience. He couldn't understand at all why people would ask him this question everywhere he went. Could it be that children couldn't come out without their parents? Isn't that child a little too deprived of freedom? What about the right to have children? You can't look down on children like this. They wanted freedom. They wanted equality. Of course, only children like Rui Sheng would have such thoughts. After all, ordinary children would not have the courage to wander around the streets at the age of 1. They would definitely be targeted and kidnapped by bad guys. As for the 3 of them, whoever dared to kidnap them would be the unlucky one. Although her parents were not by her side, they were monitoring her through the light screen. As long as the child was not in danger, both Ling Ruoxue and the demon would not make a move. Why did you let the child out? Didn't he just want the 3 of them to experience a different environment? However, the waiter would never understand the thoughts of Ling Ruoxue and the demon. She was also in a dilemma because she had been called auntie. She was only 20. 20. How did she become an auntie? Looking at the child who was in a hurry to order, the waiter corrected him, "Little kids, you can call me big sister, but don't call me auntie. Big sister isn't that old. But, we all call those who are slightly older than you, grandma," Saint Rui said with a slightly aggrieved tone. The waiter knelt down after hearing that. So he was taking advantage of her by calling her auntie. Taking a deep breath, the waitress told herself to stay calm and not to argue with a kid. Then, she said, "Little friend, you have to pay for the food here." "I know. This isn't a relief center, how can we not charge them?" Saint Rui replied naturally and looked at the waiter with a little sympathy. Why did this shop find a fool to be a waiter? Everyone knows that it's natural to pay for a meal, right? The waiter almost vomited blood. This little boy looked cute, but why did the words he said sound so uncute? Actually, what she wanted to ask was, "Do you have money?" On the other hand, Rui Jin was more understanding. He took out a bunch of coins and said, "Auntie, don't worry. We have money." The currency on the planet was universal, so the change they had exchanged in the West Coast could finally be put to use. The waitress' mouth twitched even more when she saw the coins, but she still said, "This is not enough." "Not enough? Don't be afraid, I still have more." After saying that, Rui Qiao poured out all the coins in her bag, and they filled the table, almost forming a small mountain. "I'm not afraid." The waiter was silent. He looked at the coins on the table and was speechless. Whose brat was this? Can the parents take it away? Obviously, he could not. "I'll pay for the 3 children." Just as the waitress was worrying, a heavenly voice suddenly rang out. At least, in the waitress' eyes, the voice was simply too beautiful, so she quickly turned her head. When she saw a middle-aged man and a gorgeous girl, the waitress was satisfied. Regardless of the relationship between the other party and the three devilish children, it was good that someone was willing to pay. Most importantly, the other party was an adult. However, Rui Sheng, Rui Zi and Rui Yan only saw a middle-aged man and a beautiful young lady, and were obviously unhappy. This was definitely not a chance encounter. The three of them were being followed by the bad guy. Auntie, they're human traffickers. They want to abduct us. Blinking his eyes, Rui Zi revealed a fearful expression as he reminded. Arg! It can't be. Upon hearing this, the waiter was stunned. Human traffickers were so rampant now. He dared to come to the restaurant. And in front of everyone. However, looking at the three children's beautiful appearance, it was possible that they were the human traffickers' targets. With that thought in mind, the waiter's gaze on the middle-aged man and the gorgeous girl immediately became unfriendly. In addition to the waiter, the customers who were eating in the restaurant heard Rui's crisp words and immediately looked at the two people vigilantly. Someone even loudly reminded, "Little boy, quickly call the police." Right. Call the police. Quickly make the call. The waiter reacted and was about to run to the service desk. When the middle-aged man saw that the misunderstanding was big, he immediately became anxious and explained loudly, "Everyone, don't misunderstand. We are not human traffickers. We know these three children." After saying this, the middle-aged man was about to break out in a cold sweat. He had lived for so many years, but he had never lost so much face. It was all thanks to these three brats. However, seeing that these three were so clever and knew how to use public opinion, he was still very happy. It was just that he had embarrassed himself. When the waiter heard the middle-aged man's words, he could not help but hesitate. "Auntie, we don't even know them." When Saint Rui saw it, he quickly said, "I'll call the police." The waiter was helpless. It was better to let the police handle this kind of thing. Who asked her to be a law-abiding good citizen? On the right path. Saint Rui clenched his little fist and was satisfied. However, the gorgeous girl was not satisfied. She hurriedly went forward to stop the waiter and shouted, "What police? If you dare to call the police, I'll make sure your shop can't continue operating." Faced with the gorgeous girl's threat, the waiter's heart trembled, but she still bravely met the gorgeous girl's eyes and loudly said, "You want to threaten me? You guys are really not good people." The gorgeous girl was so angry that her eyes were full of stars. Then, she rushed to the front of the three children and shouted, "Quickly tell this stupid woman that we're together. Old lady, are you threatening us too?" Rui Sheng blinked his innocent black eyes and asked with a face full of fear. "Old grandma." The gorgeous girl was about to go crazy from anger, but the waiter was secretly happy. The little boy's words were true. He really called another woman grandmother. "You three little bastards," the gorgeous girl was about to go crazy. Children were indeed not cute. Even if the little boy in front of her was extremely cute on the outside, he was still a little devil in his bones. "Huan, come back." Afraid that the gorgeous girl would cause trouble, the middle-aged man quickly spoke. "Ancestor." The gorgeous young woman was very unwilling, but she still obediently returned to the middle-aged man's side. At the same time, the middle-aged man apologetically explained to the waiter and the diners in the shop about the dispute between them and the three children. He also very sincerely stated that he only wanted to take the three children as his disciples, which was why he was chasing them and not some human traffickers. After explaining, the middle-aged man even showed off his strength. Seeing this, everyone in the shop, including the waiters, did not dare to get involved in the entanglement between the two sides. As for calling the police, hee. In this world, although ancient martial arts powerhouses rarely appeared in front of ordinary people, people were not completely ignorant of those powerhouses with extraordinary martial arts. Moreover, this world greatly worshipped the strong. Therefore, the moment the middle-aged man revealed his strength, he immediately received countless eager gazes. To be able to be noticed by an ancient martial arts powerhouse was definitely a great honor to the ordinary people. For a moment, many envious gazes were cast on the three little children at the same time. At this time, no one dared to suspect that the old and young were human traffickers. After all, how could an expert do such a despicable thing? But unfortunately, no matter how envious the others were, the three milk babies were not moved. Seeing that the situation had been reversed, Saint Rui was not angry and said calmly, "Can we order now? We're so hungry." Chapter 3080, Helping Others, 1. Hearing this, the waiter quickly brought the menu over. Rui Xing didn't even look at the menu and directly said, "I'll have 3 lobsters first. I want the biggest one." The waiter's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but say, "Can you guys eat lobster? How about a cup of coconut juice?" From the waiter's point of view, lobster should not be suitable for such a young child. Lobster porridge was fine. Of course, coconut juice was similar to milk, so it should be the most suitable for a child to drink, right? But obviously, Saint Rui was very angry after hearing this. The other party was clearly disrespecting the little boy. This was preposterous. Did he think they were easy to bully? Saint Rui was very angry, and the consequences were very serious. Then, he put on a holy look and said to the waiter, "Grandma, can you fill your stomach with only coconut juice? Then what's the point of opening a seafood restaurant? Let's change it to juice." It was convenient and the production cost was cheap. As far as the eye could see, the streets of the city were filled with tropical coconut trees. They were ready-made raw materials. However, your coconut juice is a little too expensive. It's too black. Black is dead. When Rui Xing said this, he also glanced at the picture of coconut juice on the wall of the restaurant, on which the price was clearly written, 100. His words made the waiter feel depressed again. First of all, she didn't know why the child's attitude towards her had changed so suddenly. He had called her auntie before, but now he was calling her grandma. Sob. How could he let her live? Besides, the drinks in the seafood restaurant were not cheap. Although their seafood restaurant was slightly more expensive than others, they were still the most famous seafood restaurant in the area. The hotel itself was of a different class, so how could it be compared to the roadside stalls? Secondly, the waiter also felt a sense of malice from the way the child called her grandma. It seemed that he was taking his anger out on her. After thinking about it carefully, the waiter felt that he had not done anything that he should not have done to offend this little boy. How did it end up like this? Although the waiter's senses were very sharp, he could not understand why. In fact, Rui Xing was indeed angry, mainly because he saw that the waiter's treatment of the middle-aged man and the gorgeous girl was too different, which made the narrow-minded and vengeful Rui Xing very unhappy. "You bastard! What happened to the alliance? How could his stance be so unstable? Wasn't the other party just an ancient martial arts expert?" As for the people in the shop, they were all showing him respect as if he was a rare animal. Humph. They were still gods. If these people knew their identities, wouldn't they all kneel down and worship them? Saint Rui looked down on the people around him, who took advantage of the situation and decided to give them a hard time. The waiter became the first person to eat the crab. The waiter was inexplicably ostracized and felt wronged. However, out of good professional quality, he knew that the little boy in front of him was not interested in drinks, so he still went to prepare the big lobsters for them. The customer was God. Even if the guests were only 3 little children, it would be the same. Half an hour later, the waiter brought out the freshly baked lobsters, which were red from the processing, and placed them on the table of the 3 children. Looking at the big lobster that was still steaming and had the unique smell of seawater, Rui Xing suddenly frowned and looked up at the waiter, his face full of doubt. "This is the biggest lobster in your restaurant? You're not trying to fool me, right?" The waiter was silent. He looked at the lobster that was the size of the baby's arm and didn't know what made the baby unhappy. These 3 lobsters were indeed the biggest and best in their store. He didn't deceive customers just because the other party was a little boy. However, Saint Rui was not satisfied, and even said with a face of disgust, "So small. It definitely won't taste good. Little friend, the lobsters in our restaurant are definitely the best. Every one of them is alive and kicking, and the taste is also first class. You'll know when you try it," the waiter advised patiently. "I don't need to taste it to know that the lobsters here are definitely not deep-sea lobsters. If I'm not wrong, you must have caught them in the shallow waters. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so small and taste so bad." Saint Rui wrinkled his little nose and said. In short, he was disgusted. After the waiter heard what Rui Xing said, he was so angry that he wanted to curse. Deep sea? Who would go to the deep sea to catch lobsters? All kinds of situations could happen in the deep sea, and it was not something that ordinary people could go down. "Do you think you have a swimming pool?" After taking a deep breath, the waiter told himself not to argue with a little boy. He was still young. After giving herself a few counseling sessions, she said, "Little friend, the seafood sold in all the major hotels and seafood markets on the entire planet Indigo, other than some fish caught in the deep sea, the rest of the seafood, including lobsters, are all shallow sea." "I see. Why not go to the deep sea? The lobsters in the deep sea are all fat, strong, juicy, and extremely delicious." As Saint Rui spoke, he even smacked his lips on purpose, as if he was reminiscing. The waiter could only complain when he heard that. Lobsters and fish in the deep sea were different. Fish could be caught with a net, but could lobsters be caught? Lobsters didn't come out in groups. They had to be caught manually one by one. If they really encountered a big one, it would be hard to tell who would catch who. From this, it could be seen that the risk of catching lobsters in the deep sea was too high. Unless it was an ancient martial arts expert. Wait a minute. Wasn't there an ancient martial arts expert right here? The waiter subconsciously looked at the middle-aged man, but he did not dare to say anything and looked away. The middle-aged man immediately understood and even gave the waiter an appreciative look. This little guy is not bad. They were giving him a chance to perform. The middle-aged man who felt good about himself immediately walked over and said to the three of them, "Little guys, since you want to eat deep-sea lobsters, how about I go and catch some for you?" "This is good." Saint Rui agreed. "Just wait." The middle-aged man was overjoyed when he heard this. He pulled Juan, and walked to the nearest beach around the hotel. Seeing that the eyesore had left, Rui Zi blinked and asked Rui Sheng, "Big brother, what do we do now?" "What do you mean?" "Eat. It won't taste good when it's cold." Saint Rui pointed at the steamed lobster on the table and said. "Didn't we capture that weird Shuli?" Rui Zi asked. He did not want to owe anyone a favor. "Mom said that you can't owe anyone a favor." "Well, I'm not sure if he can catch them. Lobsters in the deep sea are not that easy to catch." Saint Rui was well aware of this because he had followed his uncle to the deep sea once, so he knew how strong the lobsters there were. However, he paused and said, "It doesn't matter even if you catch him. At most, well, just pay him some money as a labor fee. Big brother is smart. This is good. We're not freeloaders." Rui Zi chuckled when he heard that. After that, the three children began to eat. The waiter at the side listened to the conversation between Ruisheng and Ruiz and was simply confused. Whose brat was this? How could he be so bad? He was simply full of evil tricks. Not only did he treat an ancient martial arts powerhouse as a coolie, but he also had to pay them. Wasn't this a waste of his money? Chapter 3081, Helping Others is a Pleasure. 2. After thinking about it, the waiter felt a deep sympathy for the ancient martial arts expert who wanted to please the three-milk baby. It was not easy to take in a good disciple these days. By the time the middle-aged man and the young girl returned to the seafood shop, the three babies had already finished 10 lobsters. The waiter was deeply envious of the three babies' good appetites, but at the same time, he was a little worried that they would have an upset stomach. Fortunately, the third baby only ate lobsters. If there were any other seafood, they would have to be sent to the hospital soon. But now, the waiter was very suspicious. Could these 3 little kids still eat? It could be seen that although the ancient martial arts expert was in a somewhat sorry state, his harvest seemed to be good. That was because he was carrying a 1-meter-long lobster in each of his hands, and the young girl named Juan was also dragging one with some difficulty. It was really a huge lobster. The waiter and the customers in the restaurant couldn't help but sigh, but they also knew that the lobster was not caught for them. Sure enough, in the next moment, the middle-aged man couldn't help but immediately come to the 3 children and put on a gentle expression with a smile. How are these 3? They're not bad, right? Saint Rui lifted his eyes and touched his little belly. It's passable. It was much smaller than the one his uncle caught. It sounded passable. The middle-aged man knew that the other party was not satisfied. He was instantly depressed. And this was what he had caught with great difficulty. Just as the middle-aged man was secretly worried, he suddenly felt a weight in his arms. He looked down and saw a transparent plastic bag filled with coins in his arms. What was the meaning of this? The middle-aged man had a bad feeling. At this moment, Rui Jin, who had stuffed the bag of coins into his hands, explained with a cute smile, "This is your labor fee. You deserve it. Don't be polite with me. All I have is money." After giving his instructions, Rui Jin impatiently snatched the lobster from the middle-aged man's hand and dragged it into the kitchen. The scene of a pink and tender little person less than half a meter in size dragging 2 large lobsters nearly a meter in size into the kitchen was eerily exciting to everyone present. Oh my! This little boy was born with divine strength. As for the weight of the 2 lobsters, no one present doubted it. Didn't you see that the girl was struggling to drag them? However, the little boy dragged the 2 lobsters away as if he was playing. Time seemed to have stopped. Everyone, including the middle-aged man, was stunned. After the middle-aged man came back to his senses, he quietly put the transparent plastic bag on the table and hid in a corner to draw circles. Woo! This detestable little rascal. What an evil fellow. He went to the sea to catch lobsters just for this little labor fee. As an ancient martial arts expert, he was not in such a dire state, okay? Seeing that his old ancestor was silent, Juan only felt the anger in her heart burst out. This is too much. They really went too far. When had they ever received such treatment? But now, he was humiliated by 3 little kids. The more Juan thought about it, the angrier she became. She rushed to Rui Sheng and Rui Zi, wanting to ask for an explanation. Who knew that before she could speak, Rui Zi very cleverly snatched the big lobster in her hand and smiled, "Give it to me. It's heavy." The young girl was furious. She wasn't here to deliver lobsters to them, okay? But without giving her a chance to react, Ruiz also dragged the lobster to the kitchen. Oh my! Another one with innate divine strength. Everyone who witnessed this scene was once again dumbfounded. Seeing that his 2 younger brothers had gone to the back kitchen, Rui Sheng also went to the back kitchen. Normally, the back kitchen did not allow unauthorized people to enter, so as soon as Saint Rui walked in, he saw the chef in the back kitchen seem to be negotiating with his 2 younger brothers. Out of curiosity, he went over. "What's wrong?" Saint Rui asked with a holy look. "Big brother, this grandpa chef doesn't allow us to stay here." Rui Jin saw that big brother had come and quickly complained. The young chef, who was called Grandpa Chef, twitched his mouth. He was only 30 years old. He became a grandfather. What an unadorable child. "Why can't I?" Saint Rui asked, pretending to be confused. "Little friend, this is an important place in the kitchen. Unrelated people are usually not allowed to enter." The chef explained to the little boy patiently. "But aren't we already here?" Saint Rui said after thinking for a while. "It's a mistake for you to come in," the speechless chef replied with his eyes. "Big brother, we can't go out. What if he changes our lobsters?" That's why we have to stay here and keep an eye on them. Ruijin, who was afraid that her brother would be persuaded, hurriedly reminded her. The chef's face darkened when he heard this reason. However, Saint Rui nodded his head seriously. It is possible, so we request to watch from the side. Little friend, we're a legitimate hotel. We won't do such a thing. Please believe in our hotel's reputation. The chef could only try to explain. Unfortunately, Saint Rui didn't believe him, and pointed out a few recent cases on the internet. These guilds also claim to be legitimate. This time, the chef had nothing to say. He really didn't expect that these 3 children were more difficult to deal with than the last. He really wanted to know how their parents taught them. Of course, the education method of the 3 milk children was obviously not suitable for ordinary human children. Len Ruoxue and the demon would not tell him about it either. Hence, he could only sigh in his heart. Third baby was happy to see the chef making the extra-large lobster. When the fresh, tender, and delicious lobster was brought to the lobby, the guests in the hotel were instantly attracted by the fresh fragrance, and some even almost drooled. When the 3 saw this, they immediately protected their food path. This is ours. Don't even think about it. In the face of the 3's actions, the people who had originally wanted to take some of the money from the 3 little babies immediately dispelled the idea. It was not that they were afraid of angering the 3 little babies, but it was mainly because a certain ancient martial arts expert was staring at them covetously from the side. The 3 little kids ate happily, and the 3 giant lobsters were annihilated without any effort. While everyone was envious of them, they couldn't help but worry about their stomachs. They really didn't understand how the stomachs of these 3 little babies could hold so much food. Could this be the legendary Big Eater? After finishing the lobster, the 3 of them handed the bag of coins to the middle-aged man with great satisfaction. This time, they even gave him a little tip to prove that they had a good time. After that, the 3 of them patted their sleeves and left without leaving a trace. The middle-aged man felt even more depressed. Then, he also left with Huan. For half a month, the middle-aged man and Huan followed behind the 3 animals. Along the way, they followed the 3 babies to several cities, and every time they reached a place, the 3 animals would eat without stopping. Eat. Eat. The middle-aged man was in a good mood as he faced the 3 little foodies who had very good appetites. However, Huan was a little unhappy. She couldn't understand why the old ancestor had taken a fancy to these 3 little foodies. In her opinion, so what if these 3 little rascals had good aptitudes? At the rate they were eating, if they were really accepted into their faction, they would be eaten down sooner or later. She even suspected that their parents had chased them out of the house because they knew that the 3 of them could eat so much that they couldn't afford to feed them. Otherwise, why hadn't they seen their parents after so long? However, suspicion was just suspicion. She did not have the courage to say this out loud. Otherwise, she would definitely anger the old ancestor. They didn't know what their highly respected ancestor was thinking, but he was actually having fun chasing after the 3 little kids. This seemed to have become the old ancestor's favorite game. The 3 little children did not avoid them. If they wanted to follow, then so be it. He would just take it as finding 2 free bodyguards for himself, and they didn't have to spend any money. This was a good deal. On a certain day, the 3 of them walked into a very famous breakfast shop to eat breakfast. This place was also the place that Ruijin had been pestering to come to. There were many customers that day, and there was almost no place to sit on the first floor. The 3 children went to the second floor to find a seat by the window, and ate breakfast while looking at the scenery along the street. The middle-aged man naturally followed along with Huan, and sat down at a table not far from the 3rd baby. After ordering the same thing as the 3 children, the middle-aged man's thoughts drifted away in boredom. The 3 children were also eating seriously. Suddenly, a man and a woman across the road attracted their attention. The couple seemed to be arguing about something. It was reasonable to say that the distance between them was not close since they were separated by a road. However, this small distance was nothing to the 3 children's hearing. Moreover, It was the first time they had seen a couple quarreling on the road. The three babies were excited to hear such a fresh feeling. They pricked up their ears and heard a certain woman in bright and beautiful clothes shouting, "Why don't you take a look at yourself? If you want me to be with you, it's impossible." Hearing this, the three of them looked down at the pie in their hands and made a decision to help. The three steaming hot pies flew out of the half-opened window, drew a perfect arc in the air, crossed the road, and landed on the woman's head with a bang. The passers-by who saw this scene and were lucky enough to hear the woman's crazy words were dumbfounded, and then they all laughed at her misfortune. "Now there's a pie in the sky, let's get together." A passerby jeered. A certain woman trembled in anger when she heard this. Her exquisite makeup had been ruined by the greasy pie. More importantly, the pie was still very hot, and she screamed immediately. A certain woman was jumping up and down on the road, trying to drop the pie on the ground. Unfortunately, the pie seemed to have grown on her head and she couldn't get it off at all. A certain woman was so angry that she shouted at the man in front of her, "Are you blind? You don't even know how to help." In fact, a certain man wasn't blind. He was just scared silly by the pie that fell from the sky, so much so that he couldn't react for a while. Chapter 3082, We've taken it for real anyway. 1. When the man finally reacted, he quickly went forward to help pull the pies off the woman's head. However, he only realized that the three pies seemed to have grown into her hair. When he pulled them, the woman screamed in pain. He was so scared that he trembled and couldn't help but let go immediately. Looking at the pie that was steadily on a certain woman's head, a certain man was conflicted. He didn't understand how this could happen. Was the pie that sticky? At this moment, the passers-by could not help but continue to jeer, "Get together! Get together!" When the woman heard this, she was so angry that the veins on her forehead were popping. However, she was on the verge of a mental breakdown because of the few pies, so she did not have the time to refute. As for the man, he was covered in cold wind and cold sweat. He knew that no matter what the outcome of this matter was, it was impossible for him to be with a certain woman. Moreover, he suddenly felt that the goddess in his heart seemed to be nothing more than this. All along, a certain woman had been beautiful, noble, and refined in his heart. Although she was a little willful, it was not a big deal. After all, beautiful women all had personalities. But now, seeing a certain woman acting like a shrew in the market, he was very disappointed and his heart turned cold. However, the woman did not know what he was thinking and continued to scold the man as usual. Even the passers-by could not stand it anymore and looked at the man with more envy than sympathy. At this moment, the three cats sitting on the second floor of the breakfast shop began to frown again. The three babies hated this kind of woman who thought that she was invincible just because she was beautiful. After thinking for a while, the three babies looked at each other and smiled tacitly. Then, they grabbed the big white porcelain bowl in front of them and threw it out of the window. Not long after, an even louder scream came from the other side of the road. Hearing the screams, the three of them continued to eat their breakfast as if nothing had happened. At the same time, the other side of the road was in a mess. Other than the screams of women, there was also the shock and disbelief of the crowd. The passers-by wanted to know how it felt to have three large bowls stacked on top of one another. More importantly, the three large white bowls that fell from the sky were now very stable on top of a certain woman's head. No matter how she jumped, the three large bowls would not fall. Not only that, the bowls were originally filled with hot mutton giblets soup, but at this moment, the soup was fed to a certain woman's clothes. The man opposite a certain woman was dumbfounded. He had seen with his own eyes three large white bowls being placed in front of a certain woman. First, the soup in his bowl was poured on her body, and then the soup landed on her head one by one. The man was unable to react to such a fantasy and could only look straight ahead with a dull gaze. It wasn't until a certain woman kicked him in anger that the slow-witted man reacted. However, when he saw the big bowl and pie on a certain woman's head, he didn't know what to do at all. It wasn't until the bystanders reminded him that the man remembered to take the woman to the nearest hospital to solve the problem. After the man and woman left, many passers-by who were interested in this matter also followed to see how the situation developed. In the dining room, Huan stood beside the three with an angry face. The three of them completely ignored her and continued to eat and drink. Seeing that she was being ignored, Huan Er's expression became uglier and uglier. Following that, she snatched the bowl of soup from Rui Jin's hands and shouted, "Eat! Eat! Eat! You only know how to eat. Grandma, please return the bowl to me." Rui Qiao glanced at Huan and said indifferently, "Old grandma." Although it was not the first time that Huan had heard these three words, but every time she heard it, she would be provoked. In addition, she was in a fit of anger at the moment, so her anger was immediately aroused, and she continued to roar at Rui Chen, "Uneducated brats, is this how your parents taught you? What's wrong with our parents?" Rui Jin didn't understand. He had his food taken away, so he should be the one angry, right? Why was this old woman even angrier than him? He even mentioned his parents. What happened to his parents? What did it have to do with this old woman? Didn't your parents teach you to be polite to others? Huan asked, suppressing her anger. Of course I've taught him. Why? Ruikio's pretty little face was filled with question marks. He still didn't understand. Then why are you guys still calling me grandma? Huan shouted at the top of her voice, not caring about her image. You're a grandmother. Rui Jin said honestly. What right do you have to say that? Huan said angrily. There's your age. Saint Rui interrupted. That's right. She's already in her 50s. No matter how she acts young, she's still a grandmother. Rui's mouth was even more poisonous as he directly said. Sure enough, when he heard this, Huan Er's face turned even uglier. His heart was filled with shock. How did these three little brats know? She clearly looked like a young girl. It should be known that people who practiced ancient martial arts, regardless of gender, were much younger than their actual age. As for Huan although she was over 50 years old, she had never gotten married and had children, so she had always treated herself as a young girl. She had even forgotten her own age. In addition, she had been outstanding since she was young, so no one dared to mention her age in person. Now, her true age had been exposed by the three little children, and some of the guests on the second floor were looking at her. Huan only felt her face burning. Even though there weren't many people on the second floor, she still felt embarrassed. However, in front of the old ancestor, no matter how angry Huan was, she still had a sense of propriety. Therefore, she immediately changed the topic and said, "That's not what I want to discuss with you guys now." "What's that?" The three babies were confused. "How could you do such a thing?" Huan said disappointedly. "What did we do?" The three of them blinked their eyes, and their beautiful little faces were filled with innocence. "Don't you remember what you just did?" Seeing the three of them acting dumb, Huan was even angrier. The three of them looked at each other seriously and shook their heads. "You're really too irresponsible. You don't even dare to admit that you've done something wrong?" Huan Er's face was full of disappointment towards the three little babies, which made the three little babies simply baffled. "What did we do wrong?" Rui Xing felt that he was really kind, so he asked. "How could you throw the pie and mutton soup out of the window? Don't you know you'll burn people?" Huan suppressed her anger and growled. "The meat pie and mutton soup aren't very hot, how could they burn people? Besides, we're doing a good deed." Rui Xing said disapprovingly. His mother had always taught them to follow their hearts, so what happened just now was exactly what the three of them did from their hearts. He did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. "You guys did a good thing by throwing such hot food out of the window." Huan could not believe Saint Rui's words. Did she hear him wrong? There was definitely something wrong with this kid's three views. No. She couldn't let the flower of the motherland continue to be like this. At this moment, she was determined to save the three little babies and let them establish the correct outlook on life, values, and worldview from childhood. Otherwise, if this continued, she really couldn't believe what these three kids would become when they grew up. That would be too terrifying. Chapter 3083, We've taken it seriously anyway, too. Unfortunately, this was only her idea. How could the three little children follow her wishes? After hearing Juan Er's words, the three little children could not help but roll their eyes. Then, Saint Rui, as the representative of the three brothers, said, "Didn't that woman want a pie to fall from the sky? We just want to help her. Not only that, but we'll also give her 3 extra bowls of mutton soup. So, that woman will definitely make a lot of money. Don't be too grateful to us." After hearing Saint Rui's sophistry, Juan was a little confused. Was it like this? Was it like this? Did the other party really want a pie? Was this what it meant to be free lunch? Taking a deep breath, Juan explained patiently, "You three have misunderstood. He didn't really want a pie to fall from the sky. That was just an example." An example? What did that mean? Are they lying to us? Saint Rui's dark eyes turned and his face was full of disappointment. "It's very possible," Rui Jin said seriously, and then took a bite of the pie, and secretly drank a mouthful of second brother's mutton soup. "Whether or not she lied to us, we took it seriously. Besides, it's wrong to lie to children. So, old lady, what you should do is not to blame us, but to settle the score with that woman for us. How could you lie to such innocent and lovely people like us? Aya. Our fragile little hearts." He had been deeply hurt. Brother, my heart aches for you. Let's go home and find a corner to lick our wounds." As Rui spoke, he suddenly clutched his chest as if he really had a heart attack. When Rui Sheng and Rui Qiao saw this, they quickly stood up to support him. The three of them walked towards the stairs in desolation. Of course, before they left, Rui Qiao did not forget to take away the remaining meat pies. It was shameful to waste food. Seeing this scene, Juan was once again in a state of confusion. She couldn't figure out how things had become like this. She was clearly educating these three little children who had twisted values. How did the three of them become the victims? It shouldn't be like this, right? Juan stood rooted to the ground, dumbfounded. The middle-aged man, who had been watching and had no intention of helping Juan could only shake his head helplessly and chase the three children downstairs. The middle-aged man was very clear that with Juan Er's intelligence, she really could not win against these three little children. Moreover, he did not think that there was anything wrong with the three little children. They were just children. They were all innocent and would naturally believe other people's words easily, even if the other party was just making an analogy. If the little child was serious, what could you do? Wasn't it too uncouth to argue with a child? The middle-aged man chased the three babies all the way back to the hotel where they had collapsed. The three babies stayed in their room the whole day and did not come out. This situation made the middle-aged man a little worried. Was he really sad? In fact, his worries were completely unnecessary. Although the three of them were in the room, they were not as sad as the middle-aged man secretly imagined. On the contrary, the three of them were very happy because they were watching the live broadcast of the hospital. The main character of the live stream was naturally the woman who had been given a pie. The woman's hair had been cut off, but the pie and the 3 large bowls were still on her head. They couldn't be removed, as if they were Siamese twins. The entire hospital was at a loss for what to do. More importantly, the doctors didn't dare to force their hands on her. They would even scream if they tried to touch her. In the end, the doctors could only stare at her. This situation made the three of them very happy, and they ate a lot of lunch. After lunch, the three of them began to take a nap. The 3 babies slept through the night. They didn't know that an old man was worried about them in the next room. It was not until there was a hurried knock on the door that the 3 were woken up and opened their eyes reluctantly. When she opened her eyes, the sky was already dark. Ruisheng saw that his two younger brothers were still drowsy, and obviously did not want to leave the warm bed, so he had to open the door diligently. He opened the door and saw a group of people standing outside. In addition to there were two other people that Saint Rui was familiar with. They were the man and woman from before. There was also a group of strangers in white coats. Seeing such a huge lineup, Saint Rui understood that they had been betrayed. Needless to say, the one who betrayed them was definitely the self-proclaimed righteous old lady However, when it was time to play dumb, one should still play dumb. Ruisheng would not be so stupid as to admit that the pie in the sky was dropped by the three of them. Who are you guys looking for? Blinking his eyes, Saint Rui asked with an innocent face. Ugh! The man and the doctors didn't know how to answer. None of them expected that the person who opened the door would be a little kid. How were they supposed to answer? Where are the adults in your family? Afraid that the woman would ruin his plans, the man hesitated for a moment before he quickly asked, "His lordship is at home." Saint Rui honestly replied. Then can we go to your house to see your parents? The man asked softly, afraid that he would scare the little boy in front of him. In fact, after seeing Saint Rui, he really doubted the words of the woman named Could such a small child really do such a thing? We can, Saint Rui directly refused. The man who did not expect Ruisheng to reject him so directly was dumbfounded. However, the other party was a child, and he naturally would not get angry at a child. He even wanted to coax her with good words. However, a certain woman couldn't take it anymore and immediately shouted, "Little brat, quickly get your family's adults to come out. I want to settle the score with them." Hearing this, Saint Rui could not help but frown and said seriously, "My lord won't leave, and he never needs to leave. You, on the other hand, should get out of my sight, or you'll bear the consequences." Saint Rui was really angry. This annoying woman in front of him actually dared to ask his lord to get out? You're quite bold, aren't you? Did he really think of himself as a big shot? Originally, he had wanted to punish a certain girl a little and separate her from the pie and the large bowl. But now, he had changed his mind. This annoying woman would live her life with pies and bowls of fish. Anyway, wasn't a pie falling from the sky exactly what a certain woman wanted? He had done a good deed and fulfilled her wish. After thinking about it, Saint Rui coldly glanced at who thought she was the embodiment of justice, and scolded in his heart, "Idiot." For some reason, his glance made shiver uncontrollably. However, did not think that the chill in her heart was caused by the little boy in front of her. Therefore, after the shiver, she immediately pretended to be calm. When the woman saw that the little boy actually asked her to get lost, her anger suddenly increased. Just as she was about to scold him, the man suddenly pulled his arm with a warning look and whispered, "Do you still want to take the thing on your head?" The woman's body stiffened when she heard that. Then, she heard the man continue to warn her, "If you want to, then be good. Otherwise, I won't care about you." After all, she was the woman he had once loved. If he wasn't afraid of feeling guilty, he wouldn't have bothered to care about this matter. However, after he said that, a certain woman really became honest because she knew very well that with her current appearance, other than the man beside her, no other man would care about her. Seeing that the woman had become obedient, the man wanted to continue coaxing Ruisheng, but who knew that Ruisheng would not buy it at all, and directly slammed the door in front of everyone. The people who were locked outside couldn't help but look at each other. They were being despised by a baby. "What do we do now?" a certain woman hurriedly said. "How would I know? It's all your fault," the man said honestly. "Sister you have to help me. I don't want to be like this for the rest of my life." Knowing that the man had no choice, the woman began to ask for help. Wanted to help her, but she couldn't do anything about the stubborn pie and big bowl. After thinking for a while, she could only make her own decision. "Why don't we ask my ancestor to think of a way?" Good. Sister Juan, I'll have to trouble you. A certain woman immediately tried to please Juan, Her careful flattery also made Juan Er's pride and arrogance swell rapidly. So, Juan Er's head was hot, and she led the group to the middle-aged man's room. Hearing the purpose of her visit and looking at the troublesome Juan, the middle-aged man's heart was in a dilemma. At this moment, he had never felt so regretful before. There were so many juniors in his family. Of all people, why did he have to bring an idiot? Not only was he stupid, but he also couldn't see the situation clearly. Didn't he know that he had been trying to please the 3 babies? He actually betrayed her. The most important thing was that the pie incident was too unbelievable and too fantasizing. If this matter caught the eyes of some people, the 3 little babies would be in trouble. Originally, no one knew about this matter, so naturally, it was impossible to find out that the 3 were involved. However, with Juan Er's actions, so many people knew that the pie incident was caused by the 3 little children. Now, he was afraid that he could not help to hide it even if he wanted to. Although he was also curious about how the pie and the large bowl had grown on a certain woman's head, as if she was practicing acrobatics, he would not ask. Who didn't have secrets? However, even if he didn't ask, it didn't mean that others didn't want to know. Once those people wanted to know, endless trouble would come to them. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man couldn't help but sigh. Then, he deliberately looked at the pie and big bowl on a certain woman's head. Although he wanted to laugh in his heart, he knew that this was not the right time, so he could only shake his head solemnly and said, "I can't do anything about this. Senior, please help me. I don't want to be like this for the rest of my life." Hearing the other party say that there was nothing he could do, a certain woman hurriedly continued to plead with tears in her eyes like a frosted eggplant. "I really don't have a choice. How about surgery? Doctors have the right to speak about surgery," the middle-aged man suggested as he looked at the doctors in the room who were looking forward to him. Chapter 3084, The 3 Busy Amusement Parks. 1. When the doctors present heard this, they immediately showed constipated expressions on their faces, and their hearts were even more miserable as if they had eaten yellow lotuses. They could not handle this woman. They had thought about the operation, but the woman refused to let them touch her. What could they do? Later, the woman named Juan came and said that she knew who did it. She also said that if they found the mastermind, there should be a way to get the pie and a large bowl from a certain woman's head. The doctors who were extremely curious about this matter also came out of their rigorous scientific attitude. Why did they go back to the surgery now after going around in circles? If they could really perform the surgery, would they still waste so much time? At the thought of this, the doctor's expressions turned even uglier. Seeing this, the middle-aged man couldn't help but ask, "What? You guys can't do this surgery?" The doctors smiled bitterly. This was not a matter of whether they could maintain a good relationship or not. Since he couldn't do it, then forget it. Otherwise, if something really happens, you won't be able to explain it to the patient's family. The middle-aged man thought for a while and then said. The doctors saw that he had misunderstood and were too lazy to explain. However, when a certain woman heard this, she immediately wailed and said, "Woo! Senior, you can't leave me alone. Sister Juan clearly said that you would have a way." Juan Upon hearing this, the middle-aged man immediately glared at Juan and his face instantly darkened. Juan Er's heart skipped a beat when she saw this. Then, she turned to a certain woman in anger and said loudly, "When did I say that the ancestor would definitely have a way? I only said to let the ancestor think of a way. Now that the ancestor can't help you, you can just think of other ways. Why do you have to accuse me? Sister Juan, Seeing that Juan had suddenly turned hostile, the woman was a little confused. Seeing this, the man hurriedly apologized to Juan and then dragged the extremely reluctant woman out of the middle-aged man's room. Seeing that the main characters had left, the doctors naturally had no reason to stay, so they followed the couple and left. Seeing that all the outsiders had left, the middle-aged man's face darkened. When Huan saw the old ancestor's appearance, she was so scared that her little heart trembled, but she could not say a word to defend herself. She couldn't understand why this was the result. She clearly wanted to give the three little kids a chance to admit their mistakes. Now, it seemed to be her fault. Huan was very aggrieved, and her eyes gradually turned red. "Do you know where you went wrong?" the middle-aged man asked indifferently when he saw Huan's expression. Huan doesn't know. Huan sobbed, feeling wronged. Hearing this, the middle-aged man almost lost his breath and fainted. "You bastard!" He really wanted to curse. He thought that Huan already knew where he was wrong and repented. It turned out that she didn't realize that she was wrong at all, and instead felt wronged. At this moment, the middle-aged man regretted his judgment even more. Why did he think that Huan was talented and intelligent in the past? Now, it seemed that he was clearly an idiot. And a self-righteous fool. Taking a deep breath, the middle-aged man calmed his turbulent heart and pointed out, "You shouldn't have gone to the hospital on your own and even betrayed those three little guys. Ancestor, I just wanted to give those three little fellows a chance to realize their mistake. Their behavior was wrong. They've already been brought up badly. While they're still young, we should work hard to establish the correct values in them. Otherwise, who knows what they'll do when they grow up." Huan bit her lip as she explained, her face looking even more aggrieved. She felt that there was nothing wrong with what she had done. "Don't meddle. I think those three kids are pretty good, at least they're much smarter than you." Hearing Huan's explanation, the middle-aged man was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. He told the truth. When Huan heard the old ancestor's words, she was even sadder. Did the old ancestor not understand her anymore? Was the old ancestor's view of the world also crooked? It could be said that at this time, Huan had already fallen into her infinite grievance mode. Fortunately, the middle-aged man did not know how to read minds. Otherwise, if he knew that Huan thought of him in her heart, he would be depressed to death. Who was the one who had a problem? Finally, the middle-aged man, who could no longer bear it, finally said to Huan, don't follow me anymore. Go back to your family first." Old ancestor, Huan's beautiful face was filled with disbelief. Old ancestor actually asked her to leave. How could she do that? If she really returned home like this, the people in her clan would definitely laugh at her. No. She couldn't just go back like this. Huan tried to salvage the situation, but the middle-aged man had already made up his mind. He then drove Huan out of his room. The next morning, the middle-aged man did not see Huan again, so he thought that she had returned to the family. Suddenly, he felt relieved. When he saw the three little kids, it was already close to noon. The middle-aged man's mouth twitched when he heard that the three of them had come out to have breakfast. Looking at the sun hanging high in the sky, the middle-aged man couldn't help but remind him, "It's almost noon now." "So what if it's noon? We just want to have breakfast." Saint Rui glanced at the middle-aged man and said unhappily. It could be said that he was taking his anger out on her again. When the middle-aged man heard this, he could only silently curse in his heart. Breakfast. Being young was willfulness. The middle-aged man, who had tacitly agreed to the three children's behavior, wanted to have a good chat with the three of them. So, he ignored the obvious annoyance on the other party's face and shamelessly insisted on having breakfast with the three of them. The three of them looked at each other helplessly and ignored each other's existence. If you want to follow, then follow. During breakfast, the three of them fully adhered to the essence of not speaking while eating. Every time the middle-aged man wanted to speak, Saint Rui would throw a look at him, and the middle-aged man could only shut his mouth. When the other party finally finished his breakfast, the middle-aged man felt that he could finally talk, right? However, just as he was about to say a word, Ruixing said, "If you want to be a follower, you'd better shut your mouth." Follower? The middle-aged man could not help but widen his eyes, and the corners of his mouth twitched even more violently. All right. Although he didn't want to admit it, he was really a shadow. He had been to several cities with these three, sob. It was really sad to think about it. I just want to have a talk with you. The middle-aged man explained. We're very busy. We don't have time to talk to you now. Ruizi replied. Ah. So what are you guys doing now? The middle-aged man asked. Why did he feel that these three kids were busier than him, an ancient martial arts expert? We're going to the amusement park. Ruijin said with a smile. Chapter 3085, The Three Busy Amusement Parks, 2, An Amusement Park. It's already afternoon, we won't be able to go to the amusement park for long at this time, right? The middle-aged man reminded him. Although he had lived for so long, he had never been to a place for children to play, but he had common sense. If he wanted to play, he had to go in the morning. It doesn't matter. We can't finish all the events in one day anyway, so we plan to play for 3 days. Saint Rui explained. According to his research on the internet, the ticket to the amusement park on Planet Blue could last for 3 days, but in fact, 2 days was enough to finish all the events. So, it was just right to go now. However, it was best to have an adult to bring them to the amusement park. Otherwise, the three of them might not be able to enter. The amusement park was different from a hotel. As long as they had money, they could stay in a hotel. However, they couldn't enter an amusement park without a parent. They couldn't even enter the gate of the amusement park. After all, this was related to safety. Regarding this, Saint Rui could understand. But they had no parents. At first, Rui Sheng was worried that there were no adults to bring him to the amusement park, but after seeing the middle-aged man, he felt that he had a parent. Let this man be their parent and take them out to play. Just treat it as making up for the harm that stupid woman had caused them. Saint Rui did not take advantage of the middle-aged man's guilt at all. Instead, he smiled and asked again, "Do you want to go together?" All right. After receiving Saint Rui's invitation, the middle-aged man agreed without thinking. At the same time, he was extremely excited. The little kid is inviting me. Did this mean that the three of them had started to accept him? In the face of the middle-aged man's unusual excitement, the three children smiled and did not say anything. With the middle-aged man as a coolie, the three of them didn't have to worry about anything at all. All they had to do was wait to enjoy. As a result, the small tasks such as finding the tools and buying the tickets fell on the middle-aged man's shoulders. The middle-aged man was not tired of it and even felt very happy in his heart. After all, the opportunity to be so close to the little baby was given by the three of them. At this moment, he did not realize that he was the one being used. With their parents' guidance, the three children entered the amusement park without any trouble. As soon as they entered, Rui Sheng and Rui Zi disappeared into the crowd like mud cows entering the sea. The middle-aged man was not worried at all, because he had followed the three children to many cities and naturally knew that they would not be lost in this world. However, the quiet children beside him had aroused his interest. Lowering his head, he looked at Rui Jin with a gentle gaze, and asked curiously, "Little guy, why don't you go and play?" Hearing this, Rui Jin raised his head to look at the middle-aged man, and calmly replied, "I just want to be a handsome man in peace." After saying that, he took out a red fruit from his small backpack and started to gnaw on it. The middle-aged man was flustered, and at the same time, he couldn't help but stare at Rui Jin with his eyes wide open, thinking to himself, "Oh my! This child's words were too deep." He still wanted to be a beautiful man in peace. "You're just a little kid, okay?" Of course, the middle-aged man only dared to think about it in his heart. He definitely did not dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, he was afraid that the little boy would get angry with him. After that, the middle-aged man sat down beside Rui Jin, accompanying him as he watched him stuff food into his mouth. He couldn't help but have a thought in his heart. He felt that this child definitely didn't want to be a beautiful man in peace, but wanted to be a fat little pig that could eat and sleep in peace. Among the triplets, the reason why he could recognize Ruijin at a glance was because Ruijin had a tendency to develop horizontally. That chubby little face had simply become his symbol. Of course, he could only think about it in his heart. He would be courting death if he said it out loud. The old and the young were unusually quiet. The young one kept eating while the old one watched with a gentle face. Rui Sheng and Rui Zi, who were originally having fun, encountered a problem. The reason was very simple. They were not old enough. The amusement park did not allow them to play some of the exciting projects, and they felt that the ones that allowed them to play were boring. As such, the two little babies were worried. Just as the two children and the amusement park staff were in a deadlock, the two suddenly saw a child who seemed to be younger than them go play. Suddenly, the two children flew into a rage. Later, after the staff explained, the two little kids found out that they could play those exciting events with their parents. Suddenly, their eyes lit up. They had parents. At the thought of this, the two of them turned around and ran. After finding the middle-aged man and his brother who was eating non-stop, Ruisheng and Ruiz didn't say anything. They each pulled one of them and ran back to the roller coaster they wanted to take. The middle-aged man did not know what was going on. He wanted to ask but did not have the chance to. Ruijin was relatively calm. As long as it did not affect his eating, he could go anywhere. When they reached the roller coaster, Ruisheng pointed at the middle-aged man and asked the staff, "With him leading us, we can play now, right?" "Sure." The staff member didn't dare to refuse. Otherwise, if the two little kids cried and made a fuss, it would be detrimental to his work. At this time, the middle-aged man who seized the opportunity couldn't help but ask, "What game?" "A roller coaster." The staff member pointed at the attraction not far away. "Oh." The middle-aged man didn't have much of a reaction after taking a glance. In fact, it was mainly because he had never played with this thing before and didn't know how to react. Seeing how calm he was, the staff thought he had played it before, so he didn't explain the excitement of the roller coaster. After sending the four of them to the roller coaster, the staff was about to warn them about some things to take note of, but they were impatiently driven away by Rui Sheng. She fastened her seatbelt and waited for a while. The roller coaster was already full of people. Then, the roller coaster started slowly. At the start, the speed of the car wasn't too fast. During this process, the middle-aged man who was worried about the three children even lowered his head to look at the children sitting beside him. Seeing that the three of them were very calm, and Ruiqiao was still gnawing on the fruit, he was relieved. However, not long after. When the speed of the roller coaster came up, the middle-aged man was the first to feel uncomfortable. What's with this nauseating feeling? Especially when the car turned 360 degrees, causing him to face down, the feeling of wanting to vomit became even more obvious. At this moment, the middle-aged man unintentionally caught a glimpse of the three children from the corner of his eye. He suddenly realized that the three children were still as calm as ever. Even under such a high-speed rotation, Ruijin was still nibbling on a fruit. At this moment, he could not help but admire the three of them. As an adult, the middle-aged man suddenly felt embarrassed. How could he be worse than the three little kids? No, he definitely couldn't let the three of them look down on him. If he was really that useless, he could foresee that when this exciting roller coaster ride was over, the three would definitely look down on him. With this thought in mind, the middle-aged man tried his best to suppress all the discomfort. Finally, they reached the end of the roller coaster. When they came down, the three little kids were jumping excitedly and nothing happened. The middle-aged man's face was pale and his legs were weak. How embarrassing. The middle-aged man really felt embarrassed, but when he turned his head and looked at the people who came down from the roller coaster, except for the three babies, everyone was in the same state as him. He suddenly felt balanced. This should be the normal reaction, right? Right? That was why the reactions of those three were definitely abnormal. But even so, the middle-aged man still felt very upset. Why was he not even as good as the three milk babies? In an instant, the middle-aged man's eyes welled up with tears. At this moment, Rui Jin, who was still gnawing on the fruit, suddenly said, "It's quite fun, can we play again?" "Oh my God." Hearing this, the middle-aged man wished he could just faint. However, Saint Rui nodded his head repeatedly, "Sure. You can play as many times as you want." There was no limit to the number of times one could play the attraction here. It was up to you if you dared to play it. "Then let's continue." Rui Ju smiled until his eyes curved into crescents. "Let's go." Rui Sheng and Rui Zi pulled their brother and went to line up again. The middle-aged man had no choice but to follow, but he still tried to persuade her, "There are so many attractions here, let's not play all at once. Go and experience something else. I'm waiting until I'm done playing this." Saint Ruiz will said firmly. Woo! He had had enough fun. The middle-aged man was wailing in his heart, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. However, Saint Rui asked considerately, "Don't you dare to play?" "Who said that? I haven't played enough yet." The middle-aged man puffed up his face and said. When he said this, he felt bitter in his heart. However, facing the puzzled look of the child in front of him, he really didn't dare to say that he was afraid. Woo! Just like that, the middle-aged man held back the overwhelming feeling of nausea in his heart and forced himself to accompany the third child on the roller coaster ride again and again. It could be said that the middle-aged man had never been on a roller coaster before, but this afternoon made up for it. When the three children finally had enough fun, the middle-aged man finally couldn't hold on any longer and fell to the ground. In the end, the amusement park staff helped to carry him to the lounge. In the resting room, Rui Sheng looked at the weak middle-aged man lying on the bed with a serious face and complained, "If you can't play, then why are you showing off? You really want to save face, but you're suffering." "Yes. You adults just love face." Rui Zi also disagreed. "Now it's good, you've suffered." Rui Jin agreed while nibbling on a fruit. The middle-aged man really wanted to go crazy in the face of the three children's echoing words. He was an adult, but he was actually educated by three milk children. This kind of experience was too ecstatic. But he was helpless. What she said made sense. He was just concerned about his face. He didn't want to be looked down upon by the third milk baby, so he had to brace himself. Sob. He didn't want to either. The main reason was that these three were too strong. It was so strong that it didn't seem like an ordinary human baby. It had to be said that the middle-aged man was right. Because these three children were really not the children of ordinary humans. Just think about it, which child from an ordinary human family could be so strong? Chapter 3086, Don't be afraid, it's all fake. 1. However, although he had glimpsed the tip of the iceberg, the middle-aged man did not think too much about it. After all, that world was too far away from him. His main goal now was to recuperate and continue to fight with these three. He didn't want to be despised by the three of them. That feeling was too overwhelming, he couldn't bear it. After lying down for about half an hour, the middle-aged man got up from the bed without a care. Although his legs were still a little weak, he felt that he was fine. However, seeing that his little face was still pale, none of the three children thought that he was fine. "Don't force yourself," Saint Rui said with a worried face. "That's right, it's not good for the body to hold on," Rui Zi also said. The middle-aged man was so touched that he almost cried when he saw how concerned the two of them were about him. It felt so good to have someone care about him. Unfortunately, before he could even say his acceptance speech, he was immediately put back to square one by Rui Jin's words, because Rui Jin said, "If you can't hold on, you'll get us into trouble. We'll have to take care of you then." Hearing this, the middle-aged man burst into tears. He should have known that these three brats weren't that kind. Because when Rui Jin said this, the other two actually nodded their heads in agreement. This kind of truth really made him too sad. After struggling for a while, the middle-aged man immediately pulled himself together and promised, "I'm really fine." "In that case, come with us to the Ferris wheel," Saint Rui said with a smirk. What was a Ferris wheel? The middle-aged man said that he had never been on a roller coaster before, so he was not sure. However, he sincerely hoped that the Ferris wheel would not be as thrilling as the roller coaster. He even felt that the third child would not be interested in things that would stimulate the heart for the time being after riding the roller coaster for so long. Unfortunately, he was dumbfounded again when he saw the Ferris wheel. Damn it! This wasn't a rhythm that would let people stop. Can we still have fun together? Turning his head, the middle-aged man's resentful eyes fell on the three. Although he did not say anything, his little face was slowly turning white. What, you don't dare to play anymore? Looking at the middle-aged man's pale face, Rui Xing said. This little wimp was too unlikable, why did he have to be so honest? The middle-aged man cursed in his heart, but he still braced himself and discussed, "Of course I dare to, but I feel that it's not good for your health to be on such an exciting event after riding so many roller coasters just now. So I think we should go and try something else first and come back tomorrow." While discussing, he was also deep in thought and gave himself a thumbs up for his quick-wittedness. He really felt that he might be played to death by the three little kids today. He should at least let him rest for a night, right? Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Saint Rui just looked at him deeply and did not expose him. He nodded and said, "All right then, let's go and play something else." The reason why Saint Rui said this was because he felt that he could not push the middle-aged man too hard. Otherwise, if he backed out, who would accompany them tomorrow or the day after? That was why he decided to stop stimulating the project. The middle-aged man let go of the Ferris wheel for the time being and heaved a sigh of relief. But then, the three kids pulled him out of the haunted house. Looking at the scary decorations outside the haunted house, the middle-aged man was not afraid. After all, they were all fake. When the three children saw that the middle-aged man finally had no objections, they ran in excitedly. The middle-aged man saw them and quickly followed. It was pitch black inside the haunted house, and there was a cold wind blowing. The middle-aged man was uncomfortable from the start, but he felt better after he got used to it. Then, he started to look for the three children inside the haunted house. As he was searching, a sinister and terrifying head with fangs suddenly appeared in front of him. The middle-aged man, who was not prepared at all, immediately let out a sharp cry, and his little heart trembled. "What's wrong? Were you scared?" At this moment, a crisp voice sounded in the middle-aged man's ear. He was very familiar with this voice, so without thinking, he pulled the owner of the voice into his arms. The owner of the sudden hug, Rui Jin, frowned at first. He didn't like to be hugged by outsiders, but when he felt the middle-aged man's body tremble, he forced himself to endure it. "Don't be afraid, it's all fake." After thinking about it, Rui Jin patted the middle-aged man's head and said. The middle-aged man saw that he was being consoled like a puppy by a little boy and once again burst into tears. However, he still stubbornly said, "I'm not afraid. I'm just afraid that you'll be afraid." TSK. When Rui Chen heard this, he snorted coldly but did not rebut. He felt that there was no practical meaning in arguing with a dead duck that refused to admit its mistake, so he was too lazy to say anything. Just like that, the middle-aged man continued to hold Rui Jin tightly in the haunted house. On the surface, he said that he was protecting Rui Jin, but in reality, without the child's company, he was afraid that he would not have been able to walk out of this creepy haunted house. When the old and young finally left the haunted house, Rui Sheng and Rui Zi had been waiting outside for a long time. Seeing that they finally came out, Rui Zi couldn't help but complain, "You guys are really slow, we've waited so long that the flowers are about to wither." "It's not that I'm slow, it's this old man who's too timid and got lost." Not willing to take the blame for the middle-aged man, Rui Jin honestly said. "It can't be." When Rui Sheng and Rui Zi heard this, their beautiful little faces were full of disbelief. The middle-aged man's face turned red and he couldn't help but complain in his heart. He really can't play happily with these three little kids. Woo, and she still called him Grandpa. After that, as the leader of the three milk children, Saint Roy kindly comforted the middle-aged man, "It's okay, the ghosts there are all fake. You'll get used to it after a few more times." He didn't want to get used to it. Woo. He admitted that he was timid, all right. Having lived for so many years, the middle-aged man truly felt that he had completely lost all his face in a short afternoon. How could this be? We can't play together anymore. In the evening, when they left the amusement park, the middle-aged man's will was still very low. Seeing this, the three-milk baby did not say anything to provoke him. After dinner, they went back to their rooms. Before going to bed, Roy Zi was still worried about whether they could go to the amusement park again tomorrow, mainly because he was afraid that the old man would back out. If they played too crazily today and scared the old man, it would not be worth it. After knowing Roy Zi's worry, Saint Roy comforted him, "Don't worry, that old man will appear tomorrow morning. He won't stand us up." Chapter 3087, Don't be afraid, it's all fake. 2. Saint Roy was absolutely confident in this, because he had already seen that the old man was a masochist who only remembered what he had eaten and not what he had been beaten up about. After sleeping for a night, he would naturally forget everything. Sure enough, the next morning, the middle-aged man was already waiting outside the three milk babies' door. Although the middle-aged man had also thought of giving up, he was reluctant to give up when he thought of the extraordinary friendship he had formed with the three little babies after spending the entire afternoon with them. He did not want to leave the impression that he was as timid as a mouse with the three of them. If that happened, how could he get his three outstanding disciples? When he thought of this, even if he knew that there was a tiger in the mountain, he had to rush up. As soon as the three little children opened the door, they saw the middle-aged man and naturally pounced towards him in joy. When the middle-aged man saw the three children's enthusiasm, he felt that his sacrifice yesterday had not been in vain. He felt that he had achieved perfection. After breakfast, one adult and three children went to the amusement park early in the morning. After adapting to the situation yesterday afternoon and a night's rest, the middle-aged man thought that he had adjusted to his best condition, so he felt that he would not be as cowardly as yesterday. In order to prove his courage, the middle-aged man took the initiative to go on the Ferris wheel. Hearing his suggestion, the three of them were stunned at first. They looked at the middle-aged man in disbelief and thought to themselves, "What kind of evil spirit is this old man? He actually took the initiative to ask to play such a dangerous and exciting amusement park. Could it be that he had been replaced?" The middle-aged man felt his face heat up again as he looked at the three pairs of suspicious eyes. "Little souls, don't look at me like that. I'm embarrassed." "What, you guys don't want to ride the Ferris wheel today?" the middle-aged man asked after calming down. "I want to, but I'm afraid you can't take it." Roy Shin continued to be honest as always, good children should not lie. This brat. Why did he have to be so honest? The middle-aged man complained in his heart, but he still said, "I'm an adult. You three kids are fine, so why can't I take it?" If he really couldn't stand it, he had to hold on. "In that case, let's go play." The three children cheered and ran to the Ferris wheel first. When the middle-aged man followed him to the Ferris wheel, third baby was already waiting for him impatiently. When he saw him, he even waved at him. Seeing this, the middle-aged man didn't dare to delay and quickly sat down in the empty seats on the side. After fastening their seat belts and waiting for the seats to be filled, the Ferris wheel began to turn slowly. In the beginning, in order to give everyone a chance to adapt, the speed of the Ferris wheel was not as fast as a roller coaster. However, a few minutes later, the speed of the Ferris wheel increased. After countless 360-degree turns, most of the people on the Ferris wheel began to feel dizzy. Their eyes were full of stars. Some people even began to vomit on the Ferris wheel. The situation was even worse than a roller coaster. As an adult who cared about his face, the middle-aged man had been holding back the feeling of vomiting. The three children were still fine as if they had been yesterday. When the Ferris wheel stopped, many people were helped down, and the middle-aged man was no exception. Not only that, but he was also helped down by 3 little children. The scene was so beautiful that people did not dare to look at it directly. However, the 3 of them were quite considerate. While the middle-aged man was resting, they didn't say that they would go play a few more times. It wasn't until the middle-aged man looked much better that the 3 of them asked to continue playing. The middle-aged man opened his mouth and wanted to refuse, but he was too embarrassed to say it. On the other hand, the 3 children kindly said, "You can just sit down and wait for us." After saying that, the 3 of them left him behind and ran away. As he watched the children leave, the middle-aged man felt lonely. He felt that he was being despised again, but as long as he thought of the terrifying Ferris wheel, he did not have the courage to catch up. Half a day had passed by the time the 3 of them were done playing the game. After lunch, the middle-aged man had a good rest, but when he wanted to accompany the 3 to other events, the 3 rejected his proposal and said, "There's nothing too exciting. I don't need an adult to accompany me. You can go and rest. Have a good rest." This tone of dismissing an old man made the middle-aged man want to go crazy. He wanted to say, "Don't abandon me like this." He was still very young. Unfortunately, the 3 of them didn't listen and ran away without a trace. For the entire afternoon, the middle-aged man had completely become the background of the amusement park. He sat alone in the corner, secretly worried. On the 3rd day, the middle-aged man wanted to change the situation of being abandoned, but the 3rd baby did not give him a chance. As soon as they entered the amusement park, they ran away without a trace. Helplessly, the middle-aged man could only search for them one by one. By the time he found the 3, they had already gone on the roller coaster. When the middle-aged man saw this, he wanted to go up and accompany them, but he was stopped by the staff member. The staff member said to him in a serious tone, "You better forget it. We don't want to carry you into the lounge again." It was clear that the middle-aged man had already been labeled as weak in the staff's heart. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's face darkened, and the villain in his heart burst into tears. It seemed that his cowardly situation could not be reversed. On the 3rd day, the middle-aged man was in low spirits. After returning to the hotel, the 3 consoled him again, "Being timid is not a big problem. Don't be dejected." "I'm not a coward," the middle-aged man explained in a low voice, but his voice was so weak. "All right. You're just afraid." Saint Roy nodded his head in understanding. "I'm not afraid either." The middle-aged man argued again. "Not afraid? Then, do you dare to play something more exciting with us?" Hearing this, Saint Roy asked. In the past 3 days, the 3 brothers had gotten addicted to the exciting events. "Do you still want to go to the amusement park?" The middle-aged man quickly asked. "No, let's go to a different place this time." "How about it, do you dare?" Saint Roy asked with a smile. "What's there to be afraid of?" The middle-aged man raised his head proudly. There was no reason for him to be afraid of a place where even 3 children dared to go. "All right, let's go bungee jumping tomorrow." After making the final decision, Roy Shing pulled his 2 younger brothers back to their room to rest. The middle-aged man's mind was filled with bungee jumping, and he was also wondering what bungee jumping was. This seemed to be something he had never played before. Logically speaking, the internet on planet Netherblue was quite advanced. If there was anything that he did not understand, he could just search the internet and find out. However, the middle-aged man was an internet idiot, so he did not even think of going online to search. It didn't matter if he didn't know how to go online. Some of his juniors must have played bungee jumping before. He took out his phone and made a call. When the call connected, the middle-aged man asked directly, "What's bungee jumping?" Hearing the question from the ancestor, the person on the other end of the phone was silent for a minute, and then began to explain. He said a lot of things, and the middle-aged man only felt that his head was buzzing. Other than remembering the words, "thrilling," he did not understand anything else. Finally, the middle-aged man ordered, "Send a junior who likes bungee jumping here. Immediately. Remember, a man." brainless women and the like, get lost. The person on the other end of the phone was stunned by the gender requirement of the ancestor, but he still agreed readily. The next day, when the three of them saw the middle-aged man, they were surprised to find a young man in his early 20s beside him. The man was handsome and his dark, starry eyes were full of curiosity as he sized up the three of them. The three of them were also very curious about him, because if they remembered correctly, wasn't this strange Uncle Shuli followed by a stupid woman? Why was it a man now? Could it be that the stupid woman had changed her gender? The three brothers could be said to have telepathy, with just a look they knew what each other was thinking. Therefore, even though the two brothers did not open their mouths to ask, but the dazed and cute Rueju could not help but ask, "Grandma, did you have plastic surgery?" And changed his personality. Hearing this, half of the middle-aged man's face began to twitch. The young, handsome man widened his eyes in disbelief. Old Granny. Who was she calling? Who had plastic surgery? Who changed their gender again? The little handsome boy felt that the other party was definitely not talking about him. But why was the little boy looking at him? There weren't any flowers on his face. "I'm talking to you." Seeing that the other party was ignoring him, Ruei-chan looked at the little handsome boy with a wronged expression. Ugh! This time, the little handsome boy finally reacted. She was really talking to him. Oh! Buying cakes. This was too horrifying. Looking at the little handsome boy's expression, Ruei-jin thought that he had guessed correctly, and even said, "Old Grandma, why do you have to do this? I can recognize you even if you change your avatar. You'd better change back. You're not suitable to be a man." Half of the middle-aged man's face twitched even more violently. Could he say that the little boy did it on purpose? However, the child's beautiful face was extremely sincere and serious. He simply didn't know what to say. The young handsome man was also petrified for a long time. When he finally came back to his senses, he said weakly, "Little friend, I've been a man for more than 20 years. Woo, you've got the wrong person. I'm not the old grandma you're talking about." What? When Ruei-jin heard this, he furrowed his little brows and had a dazed look on his face. Cough, cough. Little Ruei-chiao. He really isn't the same person as before. He only arrived last night. The middle-aged man coughed twice to attract the attention of the lower three before he began to explain. A new person. It's not plastic surgery or a sex change. Saint Rui confirmed. It really isn't. I'm a real man. You're a real man. The young and handsome man quickly said. I see. Well, believe you for now. Saint Rui smiled like a cunning little fox. Oh my God. It had not been easy. She finally believed him. The little handsome boy instantly felt satisfied, but why was it only temporary? Chapter 3088, It's Your Turn. 1. Before the young handsome boy could figure it out, the three children refused to continue the topic and urged them to quickly take them to go bungee jumping. The best place for bungee jumping, Saint Rui had already found out through the internet. It was on a mountain called Daylily. On the way, the more the little handsome boy thought about it, the more depressed he became. He wanted to ask about his temporary doubts several times, but the three of them ignored him at all, which made him quite helpless. The little senior brother thought that he was beautiful, but he was defeated in front of the three little children, which made him very conflicted. However, he also confirmed the identity of the old grandmother that the three little children were talking about from the old ancestor's mouth. It was just as he had guessed. As long as he thought of a narcissistic old woman being called an old grandmother, his heart actually felt a little excited. Then, the little handsome boy glanced at the third baby, who had his eyes closed as if he was resting, and his heart was in a dilemma again. Although a certain woman was called an old granny, it seemed that he, a young and beautiful little handsome man, was not treated well either. At this moment, he would never have thought that the ancestor he respected was not any better than him. However, the old ancestor had already warned him before that he would take these 3 little babies as his disciples, but he had not succeeded yet, so he had carefully warned him not to provoke them and to coax them. It had to be said that when he first heard this news, the little handsome man was quite shocked. Of course, he was not shocked that the old ancestor wanted to take in disciples, but that the old ancestor, such a famous person in the ancient martial arts world, had not managed to get the 3 in front of him. If the people in the clan knew about this, they would be furious. Thinking of this, the little handsome man couldn't help but look at the old ancestor again. He had a very complicated feeling in his heart. "You brat, focus on driving. Why are you looking at me?" Receiving the little handsome boy's gaze, the old ancestor said with a slight displeasure. "Ugh! I can't even look." The little handsome boy was a little speechless. Was the old ancestor shy? "The old man is shy, little guy, don't look around." At this moment, a voice came from the back seat, confirming the little handsome boy's guess. Although he didn't know who spoke, the word "old man" from the other side still made him confused for a long time. Old grandpa. Was this how the ancestor addressed him? The handsome boy glanced at the middle-aged man again, but he quickly looked away. Seeing that his ancestor wasn't angry when he heard the honorific title of an old man, the little handsome man couldn't help but be amazed. Fortunately, the handsome boy quickly put away his curiosity and focused on driving. It wasn't that he didn't want to think about it anymore, but he was afraid that if he continued to be curious, the old ancestor would be angry from embarrassment. After driving for nearly an hour, they arrived at the Forgotten Mountain. At the foot of the mountain, after buying the tickets, the handsome boy took the old man and 3 children into the elevator. However, just as he was about to press the elevator floor, a small hand beat him to it and pressed a number key. Then, the elevator started. Looking at the number of layers pressed by a certain hand, the little handsome boy's mouth was wide open, and he couldn't react for a long time. However, his back was facing the middle-aged man, so the middle-aged man did not see his expression. Oh my God! Directly to the highest floor. This was going to be a hit. The little handsome boy was silent, not knowing what to say. The elevator had a total of 10 floors. Other than the first floor, the other 9 floors all had bungee jumping points, but the distance between each floor was about 1,000 meters. The highest floor had a bungee jumping range of more than 8,000 meters, more than 8,000 meters. It was several times higher than a 100-story building. Just thinking about that distance made the little handsome boy's legs cramp. Although he liked bungee jumping and the thrill of it, it wasn't that exciting yet. More importantly, so far, no one had ever dared to bungee jump on the top floor. Only those who had lived long enough would go bungee jumping on the top floor. Ordinary people would have been scared half to death. What should he do now? The little handsome boy was at a loss, but he didn't dare to press the other levels. He couldn't be less courageous than a baby, right? Sob. After silently crying in his heart for a while, the little handsome boy gathered his courage and turned around. He forced a smile and said, "Little guy, let's go to the 2nd floor to play, okay?" 2nd floor. That's so boring. Saint Rui did not even think and said directly. What about the 3rd level? Seeing that the other party didn't agree, the little handsome boy continued. I'm not going. Rui Zi opposed. 4th level. I can't go any higher. The little handsome boy made up his mind and said, I'm going all out. I've only played to the 5th level. He had to give him some time to adapt so that he wouldn't be too high-end all of a sudden and his heart wouldn't be able to take it. The 3 children shook their heads in unison. At this moment, the middle-aged man also felt that something was amiss. He asked, What's wrong? Ancestor, the 3 of them are going to the top floor. The handsome boy said with a bitter face. Oh. Then go. The middle-aged man quickly said. This was truly the case of the ignorant being fearless. After hearing his ancestor's words, the little handsome boy couldn't help but curse in his heart. However, he also knew that his ancestor didn't know much about bungee jumping, but now was not the time to explain it in detail to his ancestor. The little handsome boy was very regretful at this moment. He should have explained it to his ancestor earlier, but now. As if sensing his thoughts, the little handsome boy immediately received the disdainful gazes of the three little children. Suddenly, he did not dare to speak carelessly. At the same time, the elevator stopped at the top floor. When the elevator door opened, the three of them immediately rushed out. Yo! There's really someone who dares to come and court death. As soon as the middle-aged man stepped out of the elevator, he heard a surprised voice. What was the meaning of this? The middle-aged man turned to look at the handsome boy and asked with his eyes. The little handsome boy's eyes drifted away, not daring to look at the middle-aged man. This time, the middle-aged man's reaction was slow, but he also felt that something was wrong. Who could tell him what it meant by someone who dared to come and court death? It's just bungee jumping, right? Could it be that his life was in danger? The middle-aged man was very depressed, but seeing that the three of them had already run out of the elevator, he did not dare to ask too much to show his ignorance, so he could only brace himself and walk out of the elevator. The little handsome boy's heart trembled as he followed behind, not even daring to look at the old ancestor. The one who spoke just now was a man in his 30s. When the middle-aged man saw him clearly, the three of them had already greeted him politely. The middle-aged man was a little jealous when he saw the three of them being so enthusiastic about a certain man. You bastard! He had known the three children for so long, but he had never seen them so enthusiastic about him. With a dark expression, the middle-aged man took the initiative to walk to the side of the man who spoke and said loudly, "We're going bungee jumping." No problem. The man's eyes lit up as he looked at the middle-aged man and said excitedly. Ever since their company started bungee jumping here, no one had come to his floor to bungee jump. It could be said that he had been waiting for this day for so long that the flowers had wilted. Now that there was finally someone who was not afraid of death and came to challenge this level, how could he not be excited? Chapter 3089, It's Your Turn. 2. Unfortunately, while the staff member was excited, the little handsome boy who heard his ancestor's words was deeply worried. However, in front of outsiders, he did not dare to remind the old ancestor that this level was very dangerous. Otherwise, where would the old ancestor's face be when he said this? The staff member quickly took out a contract for the middle-aged man to sign. The middle-aged man looked at the contract in the other party's hand and his heart trembled. What kind of contract was this? Seeing that the most eye-catching title on the contract was the guarantee of no responsibility for accidental death, the middle-aged man suddenly felt uncomfortable and his heart sank. At this moment, if he still couldn't feel anything, then he had really lived all these years in the stomach of a dog. Sign it. Sign it. Quickly sign it. After you sign this letter of responsibility, you can bungee jump. Seeing that the middle-aged man was stunned, the staff member tried to coax him. Looking at the other party's expression, it was as if Grandmother Wolf was trying to abduct Little Red Riding Hood. The middle-aged man's expression was inexplicable. Could he go back on his word? Just as the middle-aged man was thinking about this, Ruoshin grabbed the letter of responsibility and handed it to the little handsome man. You sign it, quickly sign it. They asked for an adult's signature, or I'll sign it. The little handsome boy was sweating profusely. Why did she have to find him? Woo! He didn't want to sign it, could he? He was still young and didn't want to die yet. Although this level of bungee jumping might not necessarily be a problem, it was really too high up. To sign this thing before bungee jumping, even a normal person would not be able to do it. After all, this was too unlucky. But if he did not sign it, he would not know what to do in front of Ruosheng's expectant eyes. Looking at his ancestor helplessly, the little handsome boy wanted to cry but had no tears. We don't want to sign this, but we still want to play. The middle-aged man said domineeringly after receiving the little handsome boy's pleading gaze. He also felt that signing that thing was too unlucky. He hadn't even played yet. Why did he think of death first? Can't you just let me have fun? I'm sorry, but the company has a rule that if you don't sign the letter of responsibility, you can't bungee jump on this floor. The staff member could only say, "Humph. If you don't want to play, then don't." The middle-aged man snorted. This was exactly what he wanted. But when he said he didn't want to play, the three little kids wouldn't do it. "If you won't let us play, then we won't leave today." As the big brother, Ruixing spoke out the thoughts of the three brothers. "Saint Rui, it's not that I don't want you to play, but he doesn't." The middle-aged man pointed at the staff member and said innocently. "Shameless." He was truly shameless. Hearing this, the staff member cursed in his heart, but he put on an innocent face and said, "The company has its rules. You can't blame me for this." "If I don't blame you, who else should I blame?" The middle-aged man roared. This was definitely the real-life version of the villain complaining first. The staff member felt wronged and turned his eyes to the three of them. "Little guy, I really can't let you play if your family doesn't sign it. Please understand our job and long live your understanding." "Yes." Saint Rui nodded his head to show that he understood. He then looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Just sign it." "Why are you thinking so much?" Sensing that the little boy was a little dissatisfied, the middle-aged man could not help but look at the little handsome boy with an inquiring look. However, the little handsome boy avoided his eyes and never looked at him in the eye. He was so angry that he almost cursed out loud. Fortunately, the middle-aged man was prideful and did not curse out loud. Then, under the anticipation of the three clear eyes, he signed his name on the letter of responsibility. Seeing that he had signed it, the staff member immediately smiled. "We can play now," the smiling staff member reminded him. As soon as he finished speaking, other staff members came to help them put on their equipment. Because the three babies were still young, according to the rules, they had to be accompanied by their parents before they could bungee jump. Therefore, they were wearing matching equipment. The two pieces of equipment, one big and one small, were connected together. However, now that there were three babies, one of them would always be left alone. Seeing this, the staff was a little worried. "I'll play by myself." Seeing that the staff was in a difficult position, Saint Rui was very understanding. "No, this is not in accordance with the rules." The staff member immediately refused. "Rules are dead, but people are alive," Saint Rui reminded. The staff member still did not dare to agree. Saint Rui was a little angry. He glared at the staff with his fire-breathing eyes and threatened, "If you don't let me play by myself, they'll just jump down from here. By then, your company will be famous." Oh my God! The little boy was actually threatening him. The staff member was confused and did not know what to say. After some thought, the staff member gave an idea. "Don't be rash. You can wait for them to finish their dance before playing with you. One more time. Do you think they'll dare to jump a second time?" Saint Rui sneered, his clear eyes were full of contempt. Rui Zi and Rui Qiao nodded in agreement, while the two who were looked down upon were extremely depressed. Needless to say, the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy also knew that they were the people who Saint Rui said would not dare to dance a second time. But were they really that cowardly? The middle-aged man was not convinced and said, "Saint Rui, after I'm done dancing with Ruixin, I'll play with you again. It's just bungee jumping. What's the big deal?" The little handsome boy didn't dare to say that. In fact, he didn't even dare to jump once, but now he was in a difficult position. If his friends knew that he went to the top of the forgotten serene mountain, but took the elevator down, he would lose all his face. More importantly, if he dared to say that he didn't want to play anymore, he was afraid that his ancestor and the three little kids wouldn't let him off. So he could only drive the duck to the perch. Now that he heard his ancestor say that, he really admired his ancestor. An idol. The old ancestor was definitely his idol. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, although Saint Rui still doubted his integrity, he still nodded in agreement. However, he was quite depressed in his heart. You're too young to play to your heart's content. When would he really grow up? I really want to grow up. With the desire to grow up, Ruisheng accompanied the two teams of fully armed challengers to the edge of the cliff. At a glance, the cliff was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. Instantly, the middle-aged man had a bad feeling. This place was so high. Before this, he had not noticed that they had already reached the top of the mountain. But now, he could not even play dumb. Damn it! Would he still be alive after jumping from such a high place? No wonder he had to sign the letter of responsibility. At that moment, the middle-aged man understood everything. He turned to look at the handsome boy who was standing beside him, his face already pale. Then, he looked at the excited children. The middle-aged man wanted to retreat, but it was like a fishbone stuck in his throat, and he could not say it. This place is so high up, aren't you afraid? The middle-aged man couldn't help but ask. You're afraid? If you're already so scared from the roller coaster and Ferris wheel, then it's even more so here. Ruizhi expressed his understanding. The middle-aged man's face darkened after hearing that. Could this matter not be brought up again? He really wanted to go crazy. Don't be afraid, I'll protect you. Knowing that the middle-aged man was afraid, Ruijin considerately touched his head and said. Feeling that he was being touched on the head like a puppy again, the middle-aged man roared in his heart. He was not afraid. He was just afraid of heights, all right? In addition, to be protected by a little boy, this feeling was too overwhelming. He wanted to cry. I'll protect you too. Ruiz, who also felt the little handsome boy's body trembling, also imitated his brother and touched the little handsome boy's head. Thank you. The little handsome boy wanted to cry but had no tears. This feeling of being protected by someone really didn't feel good. Of course, if the other party was not a little boy, he might still be able to accept it. But the other party was a little boy. Don't dawdle. Hurry up and jump down. At this time, Ruisheng, who was a little impatient from waiting, urged. The middle-aged man took a deep breath. He was going all out. Then, he closed his eyes, tightened his arms around Ruijin, and jumped down. The speed of their fall was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the old and the young disappeared without a trace. However, the echo of the scream was clearly transmitted into the ears of the few people on the mountaintop. When the little handsome man heard this familiar scream, his legs and stomach went soft. It's your turn. Ruisheng said to the little handsome boy. I, the little handsome boy stammered. Could he say that his legs had gone soft? Seeing him stammering, Ruisheng smiled understandingly. Then, he lifted his leg and kicked the little handsome boy's butt. Then, the little handsome boy fell down the cliff with his head facing down. Ah! Hearing the ear-piercing scream, Saint Rui clapped his hands as if he had just completed a major event in his life. The staff member looked at Ruisheng's actions, and his mouth twitched. This child is really bad. Don't think he didn't see that the two adults didn't want to jump at all, but they didn't want to lose face. Sigh. At this moment, the staff member's mood was very complicated. Half an hour later, the middle-aged man returned to the top of the mountain. He, who felt like he had just survived a disaster, was in a very low state at the moment, as if he had been stimulated by something. His entire person was listless. What's wrong, did you get cooked? Saint Rui looked at him and asked in confusion. This brat. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man did not make a sound. However, when he thought about how he had to beat again, his heart clenched in panic. Woo! Just now, he thought that he was about to die. The feeling of his blood flowing backward and his heart beating uncontrollably was really not good. What made him feel even worse was that he was scared half to death, but the little Ruiqiao in his arms was fine. When she was hanging in the air, that little fellow actually had the mood to comfort him. This was really, comparing people to milk babies, it was really infuriating. The middle-aged man, who was emitting a faint sorrow, stared at the two babies in front of him for a long time with a complicated gaze. It was only when the handsome little boy and Rui's returned that he snapped back to his senses. Seeing his junior's pale face and being carried back to the top of the mountain unconsciously, he felt a lot better. Fortunately, he was not the most embarrassing person. However, when he saw the lively Ruize standing beside the little handsome man, his mood became bad again. Up to this point, he still couldn't understand how these three could be so bold. Were they not afraid at all? Was there anything in this world that could make them afraid? Chapter 3090, They really put in a lot of effort. 1. The answer was no. The third child had already been brought to his territory by his father for a few rounds. He had seen everything before, so why would he be afraid of bungee jumping at this height? Not only was he not afraid, but he also found it quite fun. Unfortunately, the middle-aged man did not know about this, so he could only look at the three of them with a faint sorrow and resentment, especially Saint Rui. The middle-aged man's eyes clearly said, "Dear, stop playing. It's not fun at all." Saint Rui ignored the pleading look in the middle-aged man's eyes and said, "I'm the only one who didn't get to play. It's a pity that a certain someone won't let us play by ourselves." After saying that, Rui Xing shyly glanced at the innocent staff member who was shot. Suddenly, the staff member's whole body trembled. Then, he received a sharp glare from the middle-aged man and a deep resentment from the other party's body. A certain someone who was unjustly accused also felt very aggrieved. What could he do? What had he done to deserve such injustice? At this time, the middle-aged man took a big step forward and pulled the staff to the side to negotiate. The three of them looked at this scene and secretly laughed. They walked over to the unconscious handsome boy and prepared to watch him. Perhaps the three pairs of eyes were too hot. The unconscious little handsome boy woke up not long after. When he woke up, the little handsome boy was still a little confused and asked in a daze, "I'm dead?" "Yes, you're scared to death." Ruize couldn't help but roll his eyes as he threatened. When the little handsome boy heard this, his originally dazed eyes suddenly dimmed a little. Then, he burst into tears. "Woo! Why am I so scared? My life has just begun. I haven't even gotten married and had children yet. How can the heavens be so cruel? It was not fair. It was too unfair. I want to file a complaint, I want to protest," the little handsome boy cried and howled, his mouth still shouting non-stop. The three of them listened to his mumbling and their eyes widened. Their beautiful little faces were full of disbelief. "Who is that? We don't know him. He really didn't know her." Turning his head, the three little faces were slightly red. They were all embarrassed for the little guy. The middle-aged man and the staff not far away naturally heard the little handsome guy's mumbling. Suddenly, the middle-aged man's old face turned red, and he wanted to find a hole to hide in. The staff members present all had their mouths wide open, and their expressions were the same as the three, even a little exaggerated. In the end, the middle-aged man couldn't take it anymore. When he saw that the little handsome man was not going to stop, he stepped forward and punched the little handsome man's head. The little handsome man felt a pain in his head and looked up angrily at the murderer who had attacked him. When he saw him, he was stunned and said, "Old ancestor, are you dead too?" "Woo, luckily I'm not alone." "Dye your head. We're all alive and well." The middle-aged man roared angrily. "Ah! We didn't die." The little handsome boy was a little dumbfounded. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't dare to let them fall. "He didn't die," the middle-aged man said in an unpleasant tone. "Then, why did the little boy say that they were dead?" Looking at the calm little boy, the little handsome boy did not dare to ask his question. However, the middle-aged man also understood what he meant. He glared at him and said loudly, "I'm just teasing you." Was she teasing him? The little handsome boy was so depressed. Since when did he become the object of others' teasing? The ones who teased him were the three little kids. This fact hurt his self-esteem too much. Sob. Thinking of this, the little handsome man choked up again. However, in the face of the furious ancestor, the three people who were watching the show, and the staff present, the little handsome man really did not dare to cry again. However, he also knew that he had lost all his face today, and the main culprits who caused him to be so miserable were undoubtedly the three milk babies. However, when he recalled that the old ancestor was not much stronger than him, he immediately felt balanced. At this time, seeing that everyone was fine, Saint Rui said with a smile, "It's my turn to play, right?" The handsome boy was silent. The middle-aged man wanted to play dumb, but he knew that he couldn't avoid it, so he had to force himself to say, "Okay, I'll take you to play." Although he said that, the middle-aged man was still angry and helpless. Just now, after negotiating with the staff for a long time, the other party refused to let the children play by themselves. He even said that he had already jumped once, so it was okay to jump again. As a man of status, he really didn't dare to say that he was afraid. Otherwise, if word got out, where would he put his face in the future? Just like that, the middle-aged man was once again forced into a corner. When the middle-aged man and Saint Rui were fully armed, they closed their eyes and jumped down the cliff. The little handsome boy couldn't help but complain in his heart, "The old ancestor is really going all out in order to take in a disciple." While silently praying for the old ancestor, Ruizi walked up and said, "I still want to play." What? The little handsome boy's eyes widened and he stuttered again. "I still want to play." Ruizi repeated. "Can I pretend I didn't hear anything?" The little handsome boy's eyes were wide open, and he didn't say a word. "It's useless to play dumb. Equip him with equipment." Ruizi looked at the little handsome boy and turned to the staff. When the staff member heard this, he immediately went forward to help the little handsome man, who was already a little stiff, put on his equipment. The little handsome boy saw that the other party was going to be hard on him and quickly stopped him. "Stop. You can't do this, I don't want to play anymore." "Woo, don't be like this." At first, the handsome young man's attitude was quite tough, but when he saw that the other party was completely ignoring him, he could only pretend to be weak. Unfortunately, it was useless to pretend to be weak. The staff member continued to ignore him, and a straightforward staff member even said, "You're not even afraid of three little kids. What do you have to be afraid of as an adult? Don't make us look down on you. What's there to despise? If you have the ability, dance for me once." The little handsome boy shouted angrily. "Sorry, it's working hours now, we can't play." One of the staff members gloated. "Bastard. A bunch of bastards. You can't do this." Unfortunately, the little handsome boy's resistance was futile. Very quickly, he and Ruizi were equipped and brought to the edge of the cliff. Ruizi gave Rui Qiao a look, and Rui Qiao indicated that she understood. Then, she kicked the little handsome boy's butt, and the little handsome boy reenacted the scene of him being kicked off the cliff. Along with the screams, the staff members covered their faces and silently lit a candle for the handsome young man in their hearts. Good luck. Kiss. In fact, the staff members were very sympathetic to the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy, but for some reason, they did not dare to disobey the children. Otherwise, they would not have forced the little handsome boy to equip himself with equipment. At least they could see that among the 5 people, the little boy had the final say. Chapter 3091, They're really going all out. 2. The staff, who knew their own limitations, of course had to do their best to serve the children. As for the middle-aged man and the handsome little boy, they could only apologize. When the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy came up from the cliff for the second time, they were both carried up. However, the middle-aged man was awake, while the little handsome boy was still unconscious. Seeing the state of the two, the 3 of them were all regretful, because they had not had their fun at all. AI. When the 3 sighs were heard, the middle-aged man was wondering why he had not fainted. AI. Let's go back to the hotel. As an older brother, Ruishin quickly decided on his next trip. Although he still wanted to play, but looking at the condition of these two, he was afraid that it was impossible today. Hearing this, the middle-aged man was overjoyed, but he really couldn't stand up. His legs were soft. Wait, he could go back to the hotel, but who was going to drive the car? No one's driving. The middle-aged man looked at the staff and said honestly. Well, get someone to send you back to the hotel. Receiving a certain someone's gaze, the staff member immediately understood. Since these 5 people had broken their company's bungee jumping record, it was only natural to send them back. When the 5 of them returned to the hotel safely, they suddenly felt that the middle-aged man and the handsome young man, who had just escaped death, had to lie in bed for 2 whole days before they recovered. However, although they had recovered, the 2 of them were still a little listless. They had no idea that they had become famous for bungee jumping. As the first people to try the crab in the 8,000-meter bungee jump, the 2 were now the idols of all bungee jumping enthusiasts. Their photos were hung in the most prominent place in the Hall of Fame for bungee jumping fans to admire. However, because the 2 of them had been lying in bed and had turned off their phones for the past 2 days, they didn't know anything about this matter. It wasn't until the bungee jumping company came to them and invited them to be endorsements that they realized the matter had blown up. They were furious. But why were the 2 of them the only ones who were popular? The middle-aged man and the little handsome boy were very confused. What about the 3? After clearing up the doubts in their hearts, the 2 of them found out that because the 3 of them were too young, the senior management of the bungee jumping company had completely regarded them as insignificant characters. As such, the 3 of them naturally had no chance of becoming famous. However, the bungee jumping company still made a family bungee jump, but the main characters were 2 adult men. After learning of this situation, the 2 of them looked at each other in silence. They were the small characters, right? But fortunately, the 2 of them knew that the children were too young, and with the personalities of the 3, they might not like to be famous. Therefore, the 2 of them tacitly took the blame for them. Of course, it couldn't be completely considered as the scapegoat. After all, the 2 of them did bungee jump. But even so, the middle-aged man felt that he should still have a good talk with the 3. After finding 3 of them, the middle-aged man requested to have a serious conversation with them. The handsome young man almost laughed out loud when he heard how cautious the ancestor was. However, the middle-aged man immediately gave him a sharp look, so he immediately put on a serious expression. Talk about what? The 3 blinked and asked. The middle-aged man sighed and told them the reason for the trip. The 3 immediately said, Mom told us to keep a low profile, so this has nothing to do with us. The middle-aged man and the little handsome boy were silent. With the performance of these 3, they still wanted to keep a low profile? Should he be more low-key? That's just a small matter. There's one more important thing that I hope you can tell me the truth. The middle-aged man continued after calming down. What? Saint Rui asked. I would like to know how you guys managed to do that pie incident. The middle-aged man asked directly. The pie incident? The little handsome boy was a little curious. What do you mean by how? The 3 of them played dumb. Why can't I take down the meat pie and the huge bowl? Gritting his teeth, the middle-aged man asked again. I don't know, the 3 of them looked up at the ceiling. Do you know how serious this matter is? If such a strange event aroused the curiosity of some people, you may be captured and cut into pieces for research. With those people's cruel means, you will suffer at that time. So, before the situation is completely out of control, you'd better tell me the truth, so I can help you settle this matter. The middle-aged man said worriedly. I see. The 3 of them nodded in understanding, but they didn't say anything else. The middle-aged man and the handsome young man, who had been waiting for their explanation, waited for a while, but the 3 of them didn't speak. They said anxiously, hurry up and tell me. What should I say? The 3 of them looked innocent. Tell me what's going on, it'll help you think of a way. The middle-aged man said. Yes, I can help you. Out of curiosity, the little handsome boy also chimed in. But we really don't know what to say. The three of them continued to be innocent. Hearing this, the middle-aged man was about to go crazy. In fact, he had wanted to ask about this for a long time, but the three children kept saying that they were busy, and he accompanied them all the way, so he didn't have time. But now, he had to get to the bottom of it no matter what. Unfortunately, the three of them refused to cooperate. The middle-aged man grabbed his hair gloomily and growled, "How can I help you if you don't say anything? Have you not considered the serious consequences? We're just children. We don't need to think about this and that. We just need to have fun." Rui Jin said in a small voice, then took out a red fruit and took a bite. "Right, there's no evidence that we did it, we can just deny it." Rui Zi also said shamelessly. "It can be done like this?" The little handsome boy said in surprise after hearing this. "Of course, little guy, this was all caused by your old grandma. So, if someone really wants to cause trouble for us, well, go to her. We're not pushovers." Rui Zi said viciously. "Ah." The little handsome boy didn't know what to say. Who's the little guy? The three little kids in front of him were the little ones, okay? In fact, this was not the first time he had heard a certain old lady say this, but for some reason, he did not dare to refute her. Besides, he also wanted to say that the old lady had a high status in the family. After thinking for a while, the little handsome man said honestly, "That old lady has a strong backing in our family, so she can't be bullied by anyone." After he finished speaking, he even looked at the old ancestor. His meaning was obvious. You can also find a backer. The old ancestor is just right. But the three obviously didn't understand, or it could be said that they were pretending to be confused. However, Rui Jin still replied with confidence, "We also have a backer, my mom and dad." The little handsome boy was very depressed after hearing this. "Your mom and dad can't interfere with my family's affairs." With this thought in mind, he looked at the old ancestor again, and then took the initiative to shut his mouth. The middle-aged man sighed heavily and said, "Can you let me see your parents? I need to talk to them." "We cannot. They're very busy and have no time to see you." Saint Rui replied. "Very busy again." The middle-aged man wanted to go crazy. Whenever he has something to talk to the other party about, it's either the child or the parent who's busy. Could he say that he wasn't even that busy? The middle-aged man was depressed for a moment. He knew that he couldn't talk to these three. In other words, they weren't afraid of trouble at all. After thinking about it, he decided to wait and see. In the next few days, the middle-aged man kept an eye on all movements and ordered the little handsome boy to follow the three of them closely. The three of them clearly expressed that they didn't care about the little tales that appeared around them. After half a month, everything was still calm, and the middle-aged man gradually let down his guard. However, not long after he let his guard down, one morning, the three children were blocked by a group of fierce-looking strangers in the hotel. Looking at the strangers in front of them, the three who had just woken up were very confused. After a while, Ruisheng asked calmly, "Who are you people? Did he knock? Did I invite you in?" After hearing what Saint Rui said, the strangers who barged in twitched their mouths at the same time. One of them said, "Little doll, you're quite bold." "It's all right, it's just average." Saint Rui replied with a humble look. When the strangers saw that the other party was being modest, they felt a little upset. They thought that their sudden appearance had frightened the three milk babies. Now, it seemed that they were not taken seriously. This made the strangers feel a little embarrassed. At the same time, the door of the room was knocked open again. The middle-aged man and the little handsome man ran in from outside in a panic. The two ran directly to the three and held them tightly in their arms to comfort them. "Don't be afraid. They won't dare to touch you with us here." "We're not afraid," Saint Rui said helplessly. The three of them looked like they were afraid. "Ah. When the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy heard this, they suddenly felt that they seemed to have expressed the wrong feelings. This really made them very unhappy. However, now was not the time to fight among themselves, so the middle-aged man immediately looked at the strangers with anger. You have the nerve to bully 3 babies with so many people. Humph. If you want to bully them, you'll have to get past me first. The middle-aged man roared in anger. When the person opposite him heard this, he laughed and said, with you backing them up, how would we dare to bully them? We just want to get to the bottom of one thing. After that, the man turned his eyes to the 3rd milk baby and asked directly, do you 3 have special abilities? The reason for this suspicion was because the incident of a certain woman's pie was too bizarre, and special abilities were considered legendary on planet Indigo, so they had to be careful. Of course, their main purpose for coming here was to find out what was going on with these 3 little babies. If it was really as they had guessed, they had to find out how the other party's special abilities came about. This was very important to them. When the middle-aged man heard the other party's question, he also looked at the 3 little children in surprise. His expression was full of deep thought. Special abilities? Was this possible? He really couldn't believe that the legendary thing would appear on the 3 of them. Of course, based on the current situation, he didn't want the 3 of them to have any special abilities, which was not a good thing. The middle-aged man, who had already treated the 3 of them as his disciples, obviously did not want them to get into trouble because of their wealth. The 3 didn't let him down and denied, we don't have any special abilities. Chapter 3092, If you're in danger, look for your father. 1. No special ability. The person who spoke clearly did not believe him and continued to ask, since you don't have any abilities, how do you explain the pie incident? We have no comment. Saint Rui replied calmly. Upon hearing this, a certain someone was enraged and shouted, do you know that because of your actions, that woman had to undergo surgery? Don't you feel any guilt at all? When a certain someone said this, his face was full of disappointment, as if the 3 of them had done something unforgivable, making the 3 of them confused. The 3 of them looked at each other, and then let the eldest brother, Saint Rui, speak. Why should we feel guilty? What did we do? If you don't have any evidence, don't say anything. Otherwise, I'll sue you for slander. You want evidence? Alright, I'll give it to you. Please invite Miss Huan, A certain someone was furious and instructed the people beside him. When they heard Huan Er's name, the 3 of them turned to look at the middle-aged man, the meaning in their eyes was obvious. His 3 eyes seemed to be saying, you have a pig teammate. The middle-aged man suddenly felt his face burning. He really did not expect that Huan would actually become the other party's witness again. One had to know that he had let Huan return to the family. Not long after, Huan walked in from outside. However, she did not dare to look at her old ancestor and stood beside a certain someone with her head lowered. Seeing Huan Er's guilty face and not daring to look at him, the middle-aged man's anger rose. Then, he shouted, Huan come over here. When Huan heard the old ancestor's roar, she was so frightened that she hid behind a certain someone. Then, she looked at the 3 little children with hatred and said, they were the ones who threw the pie. Huan what nonsense are you talking about? The middle-aged man was about to die from anger, and the flames in his eyes were about to turn into daggers and attack Huan Although Huan was a little afraid that the old ancestor would lose his temper, she still straightened her neck and shouted, old ancestor, I'm not talking nonsense. Didn't you see it too? So you saw it too? Then why didn't you say anything? Could it be that you want to take these 3 babies for yourself? After Huan Er's words, a certain someone said with a look of realization. The ancestor wants to take the 3 of them as his disciples. Huan said honestly and glared at the 3. So that's how it is. It seems that your young family really intends to take these 3 children for yourself. A certain someone said with a sinister smile. Bah! You're lying. Our young family isn't as despicable as you. The little handsome boy was unhappy when he heard this. However, a certain someone didn't seem to mind and said to the three little children, "As you can see, everyone is very interested in your abilities, so you'd better be good and tell the truth. Children need to be honest to be cute, do you understand? Don't listen to his nonsense." The middle-aged man quickly said after hearing the other party's words. "Yes." Saint Rui nodded his head in understanding and did not intend to pay attention to a certain person. Someone was unwilling to give up and continued, "I won't lie to children. Little girl, don't believe this guy too much. Believe me, if the Yang family knows that you have special abilities, they will want to ask you the same thing as us. Their Yang family is not much stronger than us. We really don't have any special abilities." Saint Rui sighed helplessly. "We don't, but we have this." Rui Qiao suddenly interrupted. Immediately after, a small flame suddenly jumped on his fair and tender fingertips. Seeing this small flame that suddenly appeared, everyone's pupils, including the middle-aged man, could not help but constrict. Then, someone immediately pounced towards Rui Qiao. "You little bastard, you actually dared to lie to us." A certain someone cursed in exasperation, but he did not stop pouncing towards Rui Jin. Rui Jin did not dodge, but just stood there stupidly on the bed, allowing the other party to pounce on him. The middle-aged man was anxious when he saw this, and quickly stood in front of Rui Jin, not wanting to let a certain someone succeed. "Everyone, let's catch these three brats." Someone turned around and ordered the dumbfounded crowd, then pounced on the middle-aged man and started fighting. The middle-aged man was so busy that he couldn't take care of the three of them at the same time. The handsome boy who wanted to protect the three of them was also quickly entangled by the others. As a result, the three of them became live targets and were soon caught by the other party. After successfully capturing three of them alive, a certain someone stopped fighting and looked at the middle-aged man with a smug expression. "Now that the three little rascals are in my hands, you still want to fight? Let them go." The middle-aged man was furious. He looked anxiously at the three and comforted them, "Don't be afraid, I'll find a way to save you. No need, just protect yourself." Saint Rui was still extremely calm. Upon hearing this, the middle-aged man became even more anxious. Why didn't he take a look at the current situation? Why was this devilish brat still so infuriating? "Yes, just protect yourself." A certain someone was very happy with Saint Rui's words. This was equivalent to saying that these three brats looked down on this Yang family ancestor. "You shut up!" The middle-aged man shouted at someone. "Don't make any noise, let me say something." At this moment, Rui Zi also spoke. "Brat, what are you trying to say?" A certain someone asked in amusement. These three children were really not like children from ordinary families. They were actually calmer than adults. "I want to say, Grandpa, you don't have to worry about us. Just go home," Rui Zi said honestly. The middle-aged man's mouth twitched when he heard this, and his face darkened. The devilish brat actually despised him. "Yes, if there's really danger, well, look for Dad," Rui Jin added. The middle-aged man was very sad and angry. Could it be that his strength was not as good as the father of these three disobedient children who had never shown his face? Ha ha ha. A certain someone saw that the three of them had taken the middle-aged man's good intentions as ill intentions and laughed happily. After that, he swaggered away with three of them in front of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man wanted to give chase but was stopped by the handsome young man. "You brat, why are you stopping me? Don't you know that you can't let them take the three babies away? The three children will be in danger if they fall into their hands," the middle-aged man said angrily. His eyes were full of dissatisfaction with the little handsome boy. "Old ancestor, it was Saint Rui who asked me to stop you." The little handsome boy had a strange expression on his face as he carefully said. "When did he say that? Why didn't I hear it?" The middle-aged man didn't believe him. "He sent me a mental message." The little handsome boy's face was also filled with disbelief. "Voice transmission?" The middle-aged man blinked. How was this possible? Just now, Saint Rui's voice suddenly appeared in my mind. He told us not to interfere in this matter and said that they would be fine. The handsome boy said honestly. Could it be that those 3 children have already reached the innate realm? How is this possible? The middle-aged man's face was filled with inexplicable horror. If it was really as he thought, then the 3rd baby was too terrifying. Chapter 3093, If you're in danger, look for your father. 2. Xiantian Realm. This was the dream of every ancient martial arts practitioner, but how difficult was it to break through to the innate realm? According to the middle-aged man's knowledge, no one had been able to break through to the inborn realm for thousands of years. Although he didn't want to believe that the 3 children were innate masters, what did the voice transmission say? One must know that only inborn realm experts could transmit their voices. And that little flame dancing on Rui Qiao's fingertips, how do you explain that? For a moment, the middle-aged man was at a loss. If those 3 were really innate masters, then wouldn't it be a joke for him to chase after them to take them as disciples? Thinking of this possibility, the middle-aged man became worried again. The little handsome boy could clearly feel the deep resentment coming from his ancestor, and he was at a loss for what to do. Although his strength was far inferior to his ancestor's, he knew what the inborn realm was. That realm was definitely a legend now. Of course, there were also the so-called special abilities. The little handsome boy, who had almost the same thoughts as his ancestor, did not know how to comfort his ancestor. In fact, he was also shocked by this fact. In the end, the 2 of them could only stare at each other without saying anything. At the same time, the 3 of them were brought to a villa by the sea. After locking the 3 of them in one of the guest rooms, a certain someone appeared in front of the 3 of them with a smug smile on his face, along with a few middle-aged men in white coats. "Little brat, you're in my hands now, so you'd better be obedient," someone threatened. "Yes, well, definitely be obedient," Saint Rui promised. "If that's the case, then tell me how you got your abilities," a certain someone asked directly. "I was born with it. My parents gave it to me," Saint Rui replied. "You little brat, do you think I'm a 3-year-old kid that's easy to fool? If abilities are really given by my parents, why don't I have them?" A certain someone shouted angrily, "Humph. He actually dared to lie to him. If you don't have it, it can only mean that your parents' quality is not good." Rui Zi laughed evilly. "Well, if you really want the so-called special ability you mentioned, I suggest you go back to the furnace and reforge it. Finding good parents is better than anything else. Who asked this to be an era where fathers are the most important?" Rui Ju added in a matter-of-fact manner. When his words fell, the other 2 could not help but laugh wildly. A certain someone's face was darker than the bottom of a pot, and he pointed at the 3 and shouted, "You'd better think it through. If you don't tell the truth when you're in my hands, you'll end up in a very miserable state." "What will happen to you?" Saint Rui asked curiously. "In order to find out the reason for your abilities, we might even cut you up and bleed you out for research. In short, as long as we can find the key, the 3 of you won't be able to survive," a certain someone threatened. "What if we don't want to die?" Rui Zi asked. "Then tell me the truth. As long as you tell me how you got your abilities, I won't hurt you," a certain someone coaxed. "It's really from father and mother, why don't you believe it? Besides, we don't have any special abilities." Saint Rui's pretty little face was filled with helplessness. "Stop using your parents as shields. I don't believe it. Also, if that's not a special ability, then what is it?" The little brat clearly displayed a fire ability. A certain someone said with certainty. "All right. Even if it's an ability, it was really given to us by our parents. We're not lying." Saint Rui shrugged his shoulders, still looking helpless. "Since that's the case, do you dare to call your parents over for a confrontation?" A certain someone rolled his eyes and said. "No problem," he said. Saint Rui nodded. Without waiting for his brother's instructions, Ruitian took out his phone. After the call went through, he directly said into the phone, "Mom, someone caught us and cut our blood. Come and save us." Ruisheng and Rui's wanted to cover their faces. They were clearly still fine. After hearing what Ruiqiao said to the phone, a certain someone directly grabbed the phone and threatened, "I'll give you 3 days to show up. Otherwise, you'll have to wait to collect the corpses of these 3 babies." After shouting this, a certain someone directly hung up the phone. "You're done for. How dare you threaten my parents? You're dead." Saint Rui looked at a certain someone with sympathy. If they don't show up in 3 days, you'll be the ones to die." A certain someone did not take Saint Rui's words seriously at all. In his opinion, when the parents of these 3 kids came, they would also be his. With that, a certain someone turned around and wanted to leave. However, at this moment, the space in the room fluctuated a few times, and then a faint voice came from the air. "Is that so?" When he heard these 2 words, the man could not help but stop in his tracks. Then, he saw a pair of devastatingly beautiful men and women with extraordinary temperament appear in the room. Looking at the beautiful man and woman who had appeared out of thin air, a certain person almost thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. However, in the next second, he was carried by the beautiful man. "I'm asking you a question." The demon grabbed the other party's collar and said impatiently in a cold voice. "What?" A certain someone was stunned. "If we don't show up in 3 days, you're going to kill my child." Seeing that the other party's hearing wasn't very good, the evil and kind repeated. "Father, he did say that." Without giving a certain someone a chance to reply, Rui Jin smiled and threw himself into Leng Ruoxia's arms, calling out sweetly, "Mommy, I missed you so much, little Yingying. Who gave you the guts to do that?" Leng Ruoxia hugged her son as she continued to question him coldly. You are the parents of these 3 kids?" A certain person who had already regained his senses asked carefully. At this moment, his heart was trembling violently, and even his voice was trembling. In addition, the unknown man's cold aura gave him a strong sense of oppression, so strong that his legs went soft and he wanted to kneel down and worship. "Not bad." The demon nodded. "It's a misunderstanding. I just wanted to scare them. I didn't really want to hurt them." Seeing the demon admit it, a certain someone suddenly cowered and said with a fawning smile. "Scare? My son is not someone that a mere mortal like you can scare." The demon was very unhappy. He was having some alone time with his wife, but he was interrupted by a phone call. When his wife heard that someone was going to hurt the 3 babies, she immediately dragged him over. So, the evil demon put the account of disturbing his alone time with his wife on a certain unlucky fellow. In addition, the other party dared to scare his own child and make his wife angry. With all these added together, he could not let a certain someone off. Someone is dead. Although he had sentenced someone to death, the demon did not intend to let him die too easily. Immediately, he raised his hand and cut open the space of the 9 nether prison, then threw someone in. After dealing with a certain someone, the demon turned his eyes to the few people in white coats and asked indifferently, "You're in charge of bleeding and slicing my child?" "No, no." The men in white coats were so scared that their mouths were wide open and their eyes were wide open. The man in front of them was so intimidating that even though he didn't glare at them, they felt an endless fear in their bones as if they had seen a demon from hell. More importantly, they didn't know where the man had thrown the man in front of them. So, they wouldn't dare to admit it even if they had 100 guts. However, did they have to admit it? The demon sneered and did not say anything else. He also cut open the space of the netherworld prison, and the few people in white robes also disappeared into the space channel. After cleaning up the trash in the room, the evil demon cleaned up the trash in the villa that had participated in bullying his own child before returning to the room. At this moment, the 3 of them were acting coquettishly with their dear mother. When the demon saw this, he immediately glared and said, "Little brat, you're already so old and you're still in your mother's arms. Get out of here." "No way. You've been occupying mother for so long, it's time to return her to us. Saint Rui tilted his head and provoked. My wife is mine. The evildoer gritted his teeth and reminded his son. Your wife is our mother. Saint Rui also reminded. Seeing that her dear husband was about to quarrel with her son again, Leng Ruoxua smiled helplessly and said, All right, stop quarreling. You're all mine. Yes, honey, I must be yours. The demon quickly tried to please him. Mom, we're yours too. The three children also said. Be good. Be good. Leng Ruoxua first touched the demon's head, then the three children's. The demon was a little dissatisfied with the same treatment he received from his son. He should have been treated better than his son. Seeing through his thoughts, Leng Ruoxua glared at him without batting an eyelid. Then, she smiled at the three children and said, Babies, you've been playing outside for so long. Isn't it time to go home? Wife, the demon wanted to object. If they went home, they would be snatching his wife away from him. Therefore, he was extremely unwilling to let the three brats go home so soon. It would be best if they were older, and then he could throw them directly into the chaos world, hee. Unfortunately, even though he had a good idea, he did not have the chance to say anything before his wife glared at him and he swallowed his words. The training is over. Blinking his eyes, Rui Jin asked. Let's put this to rest for now. I think you should go to kindergarten. Leng Ruoxua replied honestly. Although the three babies had extremely high IQs and were able to take care of themselves, so there was no need for them to go to kindergarten at all, she still hoped that her son could interact with more children and experience childhood life. This was because everyone only had one childhood. What's a kindergarten? Saint Rui could not help but ask. Kindergarten is a school for children your age. There are many children around your age in there, so it's very fun. Leng Ruoxua coaxed. Around our age? Ruizi blinked his eyes in disgust. Doesn't that mean he's still wet the bed? He knew very well that many ordinary human children would wet their beds when they were more than 1 year old. Ah. There are also some who are slightly older than you. Leng Ruoxua hurriedly explained when she saw that her son seemed to despise children of the same age. Yes, there are all kinds of old people in school, so go to kindergarten. It's fun there. Even the demon was persuaded. Kindergarten is good, it's best if it's full-time, hee. The demon was very happy. When the brat went to kindergarten, his wife would still be his alone. Seeing that both their parents wanted them to go to kindergarten, the three of them communicated with their eyes and then nodded in unison. All right, let's go to the kindergarten. To the three of them, it didn't make a difference whether they were at home or going to the kindergarten that they had never heard of before. However, since their mother wanted them to go, they would just go and ruin the kindergarten. Chapter 3094, Heading to the Kindergarten. 1. As a good child, he had to obey his mother's words. Seeing that the three of them had agreed so easily, Leng Ruoxua was naturally happy. The demon was also happy. Without the three of them at home, he could spend the day alone with his wife. Just thinking about it made him feel happy. However, before they went home, the three of them strongly requested to go to the hotel they had stayed in before to take a look. At least they had to let a certain strange Shuli know that they were safe. After all, these few days, strange Shuli had accompanied the three of them in their madness. At least they had formed a revolutionary friendship. Leng Ruoxua and the demon naturally had no objections to their son's small request. With a teleportation, the five of them arrived at the hotel that the three of them had stayed in before. In the hotel room, the middle-aged man and the handsome little boy were worried about the three of them, but they were still in a dilemma since they could communicate with each other. However, even so, the two of them had contacted their close friends many times to ask them to help them find the whereabouts of the three. Not long after the two of them put down the phone, the door of the room they were in suddenly opened. The first to enter was a man and a woman. The middle-aged man and the handsome young man's first reaction was surprise, followed by uneasiness. As for why they felt uneasy, the two of them couldn't explain it, but they couldn't deny that the pressure this man and woman gave them was too great. By right, a handsome young man should be very excited to see a beautiful woman. However, under the pressure of a certain cold man's gaze, he did not dare to have any improper thoughts. This was because the stern-faced man's face clearly said, "How dare you have any ideas about my woman? Die." Although the man and woman didn't say a word after they came in, the little handsome man had this feeling. Even the middle-aged man felt that the two of them were not to be trifled with. With this thought in mind, the middle-aged man and the handsome boy did not dare to say a word since they did not know the purpose of the stranger's visit. They could only look at the stranger and wait for the other to speak first. However, as their hearts beat faster, the couple at the door still had no intention of speaking first. Suddenly, the middle-aged man and the handsome little boy were a little unsettled. Cold sweat was already dripping down the handsome boy's forehead. At this moment, a childish voice sounded, "Mom, Dad, don't scare the old man and this little guy. Look at how scared they are." These words were said by the Ruiqiao brat. Upon hearing this familiar voice, the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy's faces were filled with disbelief. The three of them were fine. Were this couple the three pets' father and mother? Just as they were thinking about this, three of them appeared from behind Ling Ruoxue and the demon. When they saw the three of them smiling brightly, the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy could finally believe what they were seeing. The three of them had really been saved. It seemed that the other party's parents were not simple. This time, the middle-aged man did not know how to face the other party's parents. Thinking back, he had wanted to hit on the other party's son. In the end, his parents were not ordinary people at all. He could not even see his strength. AI. It was infuriating to compare people. Looking at how young his parents were, how could their strength be so unfathomable? The middle-aged man had no doubt that this couple's strength was above his. Although at this moment, he secretly thought that they might also be old monsters, the vitality in their bodies was very active. It was clearly the vitality that only young people had. In this regard, his vitality could not be compared to the other party at all. It was with this thought that he felt that the other party was young and his strength was unfathomable. It really made people envious, jealous, and hateful. For a moment, the middle-aged man thought a lot, but soon he was depressed again. They were both human, but why was the difference so big? And the brats, calling him old master in front of such a young parent. This was really too despicable. Didn't they make him old? The little handsome boy also had the same thought. This wasn't the first time he had been called a little fellow by a certain brat, but he definitely didn't expect that Ruiqiao, who only cared about eating, would actually call him that. Who was the little fellow here? Who is it? The little handsome boy was a little mad deep down, but he could only endure it in front of his parents. Ling Ruoxue glanced at the two of them, who were in a dilemma. They were trying their best not to show their emotions on their faces. Ling Ruoxue smiled and said, "Thank you for taking care of my baby. Now, we're going to take them home." "Yes, Mom wants us to go to kindergarten, so we can't play outside anymore," Saint Rui added. Upon hearing this, the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy were quite surprised. Go to kindergarten? They really wanted to say, do these three extremely smart little demons need to go to kindergarten? Wouldn't that be bullying children of the same age? As soon as they thought about how these three evildoers were going to wreak havoc in the kindergarten, the middle-aged man and the handsome little boy couldn't help but pray for the kindergarten that was about to be in trouble. It was really too terrifying. Thinking of the terrible consequences that were about to come, although the middle-aged man and the handsome little boy wanted to gossip, as soon as they saw the cold face of the man in front of them, they did not dare to say anything. However, the three of them were sensitive enough to sense the worry of the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy. They smiled and said, "Don't worry about us, it's just a kindergarten. It's child's play." The middle-aged man and the little handsome boy looked at each other and shouted in their hearts at the same time, "Dear, we're not worried for you." In comparison, the two of them were obviously more worried about the safety of the kindergarten. However, he obviously couldn't say this. On the other hand, Leng Ruoxue and the demon chose to ignore the thoughts of the two adults. After some small talk, Leng Ruoxue and the demon planned to leave with their child. Before they left, Leng Ruoxue gave the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy 2 fruits that were suitable for them to eat as a token of her appreciation. She watched as they ate the fruits. Of course, she said that she was thanking them, but in reality, she was trying to comfort the 2 of them, who had been tormented physically and mentally because of their 3 babies. After that, the couple turned to leave with the babies. At that moment, Leng Ruoxue's beautiful eyes were attracted by a corner of a shirt that was revealed at the leg of the bed. The evildoer quickly noticed his wife's abnormality. He narrowed his cold eyes and strode to the leg of the bed. He pulled out the owner of the clothes with a look of disgust. He pulled out an extremely disheveled and unconscious woman. When the middle-aged man and the handsome young man saw her, they immediately felt embarrassed. It was Huan, who was carried out by the evildoer. The reason why Huan was unconscious was because he was beaten up by the angry middle-aged man. After that, Huan was thrown aside by the 2 of them. Logically speaking, this kind of thing should not be discovered by outsiders, but now, the 2 could only stand awkwardly, neither of them daring to shout, "Let go of that woman." Chapter 3095, Heading to the Kindergarten, 2, It's that old lady. As if he had discovered a new continent, Rue Zi said with a smile. Dad, this is the woman who betrayed us. Rue Jin also complained. Is that so? After the demon heard this, he raised his eyebrows and looked at the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy with an unfriendly expression. Suddenly, the 2 of them were so scared that they trembled all over. This matter wouldn't be directed at them and the entire Yang family, right? The middle-aged man and the little handsome boy didn't know how powerful the demon in front of them was, but the fact that he was able to save the 3 children from the hands of those guys was enough to prove his strength. So at this moment, the 2 were very afraid that the other party would take his anger out on them, and at the same time, they were worried whether the Yang family could bear it. Leng Ruoxue could tell that the 2 of them were worried. She could not help but smile and comfort them. Don't be afraid. As long as the power you belong to isn't muddle-headed, we won't take out our anger on your entire clan. However, if your clan doesn't know what's good for them, then don't blame us for exterminating them. You should know that exterminating your entire clan is just the blink of an eye for us. Leng Ruoxue's words were both soft and hard. As a divine master, she naturally hoped that the other party was wise. That would save her the trouble of having to take action. In addition, she did not want to vent her anger on him because this was not the divine realm. After becoming a mother, she was a little more tolerant of ordinary people. Thus, she could punish the culprit, but would not vent her anger on others. Of course, the premise was that the other party had to know their own limitations. The middle-aged man and the little handsome boy immediately nodded like garlic being pounded. The middle-aged man even expressed, "Don't worry, our family is very reasonable. We will never do something that we shouldn't do for someone who betrayed our family." Hearing his words, Leng Ruoxue nodded her head in satisfaction. After all, this was within her expectations. Otherwise, she would not have given the fruits to the 2 of them. After hearing the other party's words, the demon also said indifferently, "Since that's the case, I'll deal with this ant who dared to betray my son." Then, before the middle-aged man and the handsome boy could react, he raised his hand and opened a space gap, throwing the woman and his hand in. This scene deeply shocked the middle-aged man and the handsome young man. Their eyes were wide open and their faces were full of shock. They couldn't help but mumble, "Heavens! What is that?" They did not know why a dark crack had suddenly appeared in the room. The power that had inadvertently leaked out from the crack was so terrifying that it made people shudder. Huan had disappeared after being thrown into the crack. Although the 2 of them wanted to know what had happened, no one dared to ask. Moreover, the scene in front of them was beyond their knowledge. It was obviously not something that ordinary people could come into contact with. Just like that, the middle-aged man and the little handsome boy remained in a daze. They didn't even realize that Leng Ruoxue and the demon had already left with the child. It was only when the two of them suddenly felt a sharp pain in their stomachs that they reacted and ran straight to the washroom. After they came out, the two of them could clearly feel that their bodies were different. A lot of impurities had been discharged from their bodies, and the middle-aged man could even faintly feel the signs of a breakthrough that had not been made for a long time. The middle-aged man didn't even have the time to tell the little handsome boy about the surprise. He only told him that he was going to break through and sat cross-legged on the bed. After a long time, the middle-aged man successfully broke through. Although he had yet to break through to the Scientian realm, he was much better than before. More importantly, his aptitude was no longer the same as before, and it was only a matter of time before he broke through to the Khanate level. The middle-aged man's eyes started to water up at the thought of this. As a martial artist, breaking through to the inborn realm was his biggest dream. However, he also knew that his body had undergone a marrow cleansing. This should be the benefit of the woman staring at the fruit he ate. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Then, he carefully observed the little handsome man for a while before he cautiously said, "Don't let anyone know about this." The little handsome man's heart trembled at the old ancestor's caution, and he asked dumbly, "What's the matter?" "Pig. Didn't you notice that your aptitude has improved a lot?" The middle-aged man was exasperated and said with a look of disappointment, "What a pig! How could he have such a stupid descendant? He was having a headache." "Ah. I really didn't notice, but I did notice that the old ancestor seems to have become younger again." The little handsome boy blinked his eyes and joked. "You brat, you've got some guts now." The middle-aged man's eyes widened when he heard that. Hee hee, it's true. But, ancestor, what's going on with us?" The little handsome boy still didn't understand. "Idiot. It should be because of the fruit." The middle-aged man replied honestly. "Arg. Could it be that the fruit was bad? No wonder I had diarrhea for so long. However, there are also advantages to being bad. At least I feel as light as a swallow after having diarrhea," the handsome boy said smugly. "Pa." The middle-aged man slapped the little handsome boy's head and looked at him as if he was wasting God's gift. He said fiercely, "What we're eating should be the legendary and precious spiritual fruit." "Arg. Was it a spiritual fruit? But is the effect of the spirit fruit just diarrhea?" The little handsome boy was very excited, but then he felt that it was unbelievable. "Do you think anyone can eat spirit fruits? We have diarrhea because there are impurities in our bodies. The spiritual fruit is helping us. So, you have to be grateful, you know. This matter can be big or small, you can't tell anyone else, or else you'll cause trouble for others," the middle-aged man warned. "Not even the family?" The handsome boy couldn't help but ask. "You're not allowed to say anything. This is not our selfishness, but for the good of the family. As you can see, that couple isn't ordinary people at all, and offending them won't do us any good. We can't afford to offend them, so in order to avoid trouble, we can only keep this matter to ourselves, understand?" the middle-aged man said sternly. "Understood." The little handsome boy quickly nodded. "Also, you will be my personal disciple from now on. I will personally guide you," the middle-aged man continued. "Thank you, old ancestor." The little handsome boy quickly knelt down and was extremely excited. It must be known that a direct disciple and a young family member were absolutely not the same. With the supreme position of the old ancestor in the young family, he was definitely considered to have reached the sky in a single step. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but thank the 3 milk babies who liked to call him little fellow. If it weren't for them, he was afraid that he wouldn't have such an opportunity. After a simple master-disciple ceremony, the master-disciple relationship between the two was set. But then, the little handsome boy heard the old ancestor sigh again and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Old ancestor, why are you sighing? If you have any difficulties, as long as you give the order, this disciple will not hesitate to do so." "I'm thinking. He has helped us so much, sigh. I don't deserve it," the middle-aged man said after some thought. "Ah. Why don't we give them a hand too? The handsome boy suggested. He also felt that he had gained a big advantage. Why would they need our help? The middle-aged man was very worried. The couple was mysterious and he didn't think he could help them. "Want you know if you ask?" the little handsome boy said. "They've already left, how can you ask?" The middle-aged man was very depressed. He was completely petrified at the time and didn't have time to ask for a contact information. Of course, even if he wasn't petrified, he knew that he wouldn't dare to ask for it. "Hee, I have the 3 babies' phone numbers," the little handsome boy said with a little pride. Hearing this, the middle-aged man became even more depressed. He couldn't help but think to himself, these 3 heartless little things. They've known each other for so long, but I still don't know about the 3 phone numbers. But now, a junior was ahead of him. The middle-aged man suddenly felt that he was a failure of a person. Even the satisfied look in his eyes when he looked at the little handsome man instantly became gloomy and cold. "Give those 3 brats a call and tell them not to be shy if they need anything." After saying that, the middle-aged man turned around and left angrily. The little handsome boy was not used to his ancestor's sudden arrogance. If he had not been with his ancestor all this time, he would have suspected that this person was really his ancestor. However, he still obediently followed his ancestor's instructions and gave the 3 a love call. At this time, the 3 of them had already arrived home and were eating their mother's love meal. However, after receiving the call from the little handsome boy, the 3 of them ran back to their room secretly. "Ah! Could it be that our son has a girlfriend?" Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but tease her son when she saw how mysterious he was. "My son is amazing." The demon cooperated with his wife, and the couple teased each other very happily. Leng Qingtian and Leng Ruhan, who were watching from the side, couldn't stand it anymore. One of them rolled his eyes at them. "What are you talking about? My grandson is not even 2 years old. If they dare to start a relationship at such a young age, it'll break that girl's legs. You're not allowed to lead my 3 grandsons astray." "Oh my God." The moment Leng Ruoxue heard this, she quickly surrendered. She didn't dare to joke around anymore. She couldn't afford to offend a grandfather who was so protective of his children. Following which, Leng Ruoxue took the initiative to change the topic. "Hubby, you can send the 3 kids to kindergarten tomorrow." "All right." The demon nodded. He would definitely complete the task given by his wife seriously. Anyway, his wife had already chosen the kindergarten, and he was only responsible for bringing the child to sign up. "I heard that there's an exam." However, with his child's intelligence, he believed that only his son had the right to choose the school. The confident demon didn't even care about the exam. What Leng Ruoxue didn't tell him was that she had chosen an international private kindergarten for her sons. Other than the expensive school fees, the admission requirements were very strict. However, it wasn't that Leng Ruoxue didn't tell him on purpose, because she didn't notice it herself. She only found out from the internet that the kindergarten was said to be the best on planet Indigo. Since it was the best, her son naturally had to go and take a look. The next morning, the evildoer set off with the 3 beautiful and cute babies.